Karen took a step forward, face contorted as he stared down at my ruined hands and clawed-up arm. Augustus went unnaturally still beside him, and his face paled until his scar was a stark slash of red.
Who the fuck did this to you?
Oh, it's like a scale. I like that.
Right?
Da-da-da-da. Karen's raspy voice increased in decibel until he was shouting at the top of his lungs.
Give me their name!
Augustus pulled out a gun and the safety, his eyes wild. Helen sobbed harder into the sand. I turned away from the men, searching through the faces standing on the sands. Fury was a living, pulsing thing. My blood boiled as my frosty breath lingered in the chilled air.
I'm sorry, I'm still laughing about the gun!
He's like Shadow the Hedgehog, he just pulls out a gun.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the SBU English Club podcast, the best critique group that nobody asked for. I am Andrew.
And I'm Jay. And I don't mean to bring down the mood, but it is sort of unfortunate that I think this episode is going to be a little bit more disciplinary than they usually are. We have received a special request from Jasmine Mas's English teacher, who's a little bit concerned by the type of stories that Jasmine has been submitting for, their quarterly short story checkups. And she's kindly asked us that we step in and see if maybe we can offer some suggestions as to how Jasmine's fiction could be improved. So as you can see, she's not here yet. She'll be here in a few minutes, but we'll try to keep it fun. But, we might have to be a little bit stern. We'll see how it goes.
What Jasmine's English teacher doesn't realize is that she's actually sold Jasmine to our care. So as us, the club of literary death, or whatever they're called in Blood of Hercules, it is our duty to run Jasmine Mas through a gauntlet, or a crucible, if you will, of trials in which she will not be able to sleep, because I sure have lost a lot of sleep because of this book. Actually, I don't know. Yeah. I liked it more than I thought I would. There was this reputation of this book that it was like horrendous, or like, especially bad. And I won't count Lightlark, because a lot of my feelings about Lightlark come from like my personal disappointment in the progression of the plot. But like, I don't know, maybe we're biased, because what I'm comparing it to is like Nova's Playlist, where it's just like a deeply unwell person writing a story. And here it's just like, I don't know, someone's Wattpad story got a little bit out of hand. But, there's a lot to like about that. I think Jasmine's English teacher is going to be surprised to find that there's a lot to like about this book. There's a lot going on that I think justifies its existence in the literary canon. But, yeah, sorry, you've been sold to One Direction. I mean, the English Club podcast.
Oh, she's here. Oh, Jasmine, yeah, welcome in. You could sit next to Lauren Roberts, I think. Yeah, you guys seem like you're about the same age, about the same skill level. You guys you have geometry together next period. That's great. So you already know each other. Yeah, take a seat right there. And without further ado, we'll get right into it.
So, I have an unmarked box full of eyeballs and jewels for a couple of people who have joined our Order of the Orb-Fox tier of supporters. They are Pink Catsy, Simply FJ, Aiden Feltkamp, Tricolith, Rin, Arthur Clybourne Wrights, Spooks, John Pick, Window, and Zubin Kane. We also want to give a shout out to the mutts running around with their magical powers. They are Navari, Natalia, Mallard Griff, Ace, Milo is Tired, Evil Red Flame, A Marvelous Geek, and Will. Thank you guys so much for your support.
So let's get right into it.
Okay. All right, Jay. This mysterious woman appeared to me. I think she said something about being a delphin or something, and she said Jay must present the summary of Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Mas. And then I was like, okay, it's the law. So if you don't do this, I actually don't know what will happen if you disobey this law. But
okay. We should probably follow it just to be safe.
Just to be safe.
And I also see it says here that I have to do it at the age of 26, which I am. That's kind of interesting.
Whoa.
All right.
One could say you're in a forced marriage to literature.
Okay. So this has the potential to spiral into a Nova's playlist length summary. Spiral/pause, I should say. Or in this book's case, spiral parentheses pause. I did not break this up into arcs, as Andrew did for Nova's playlist, not out of slothfulness, but rather because there is precisely one arc, and it lasts for the entire story.
Yep.
And the novel actually ends before the arc reaches anything resembling a zenith. So,
or a nexus.
Here it is. Or a nexus, even. Blood of Hercules, arc 1, beginning with our prologue, in which some kind of prophet lady, who will not be reappearing in the book, orders the leaders of all the Spartan houses to pass this marriage law that says you have to be married by the age of 26 if you're this certain type of heir. We'll get into it. The house leaders resist this initially, but then they all bow down to her when she yells at them some, and they pass the law. This is presented to us without context, and again, that lady will not be coming back.
Nope.
We then get a second prologue. This prologue is, holding myself back from getting into critiques, this prologue is basically all of the backstory of the entire world. It's like if at the front of Fellowship of the Ring was an abbreviated version of the Silmarillion, basically, with a few lines that like sound suspiciously Lord of the Ringsy, as though she like realizes she's doing this like extended voiceover thing. Yeah. But the broad strokes of it are this. There are these godlike beings called Spartans that first appeared in what is today Greece, but they appeared in ancient times when you would expect.
No, they appeared in an archipelago island.
I'm sorry, in an archipelago island in modern day Greece, but it's ancient times. Right. And then humans also appear and start worshiping them. Then everyone migrates to Italy and founds the Roman Empire.
For no reason.
The human population is doing great, but the Spartan population is not. For some reason, they have some kind of fertility issues. So humans think that they have the chance to overpower Spartans and steal their powers, so they make an attempt, but the Spartans decide to just run away, like disappear into mythology, basically, and that causes Rome to fall. Then we sort of gloss over a huge swath of time. Spartans and creatures, which are basically just like, magical creatures like centaurs and satyrs and stuff, all become mythology. They disappear as well. They continue living in secret, but most humans don't know about them. But they are living in these little secret societies, amassing wealth and developing super advanced technology. At this point, Sparta splits into two factions, the Olympians and the Chthonics. The Olympian Spartans have powers that the book says enhance themselves, like they're non-harmful, and we barely ever see that, but sure, whatever.
Well, it's like in Powerless, how there was a distinction between the lethals and the goods, or something like, or
like
elites,
the defensives and offensives.
Yeah. I think it's like that. That was my vibe. Is like the Spartans had like, I don't know, good powers. They could teleport, and I think everyone can teleport, but they can make plants grow or whatever, and a chthonic would kill the plant or whatever, kind of like like a yin and yang,
sort of like
thing.
the powers that are struggling for dominance inside of Isla Crown.
Right.
The powers of both life and death.
Yes. So that's what we got here, this dichotomy.
Yeah, basically. Olympians are also not afraid to have kids with humans. Meanwhile, Chthonics have blood red eyes and evil magic like mind control that can totally f people up, especially the people at my shit high school that I hate. Anyway, There have always been exactly 4 and only 4 chthonic houses. For some reason, this prologue really, really emphasizes that, and then it doesn't matter at all, but there are only 4, and don't you forget it.
There are only 4, and then the other 8 Olympian houses, there used to be more, and it
50,
just dwindled. 50, okay.
Yeah.
And it just, they just started dying out.
Okay, then for some unexplained reason, the Chthonics and the Olympians go to war, which begins World War I. This is the point where the novel fully diverges from history. By 2045, World War I, which is just called the Great War in this continuity, obviously, because there was no second war, has reached a stalemate. The war eventually ends, but the Chthonics have to cede a ton of power, and then in 2050, Titans appear on Earth and just start killing people. Society collapses.
Like an Evangelion.
And the Olympians, like an Evangelion, basically. The humans the Olympians use this as an opportunity to make themselves basically rulers of the human world again. They come out of hiding. They're like, we're gods, we're going to save you. But they create a dystopia with massive class disparity where most humans are living in abject poverty. And they delegate dealing with the Titans to the Chthonics, the Assembly of Death, which is a group of Chthonic heirs that have to run around the Earth and fight Titans. So again, like Evangelion.
It did not dawn on me as correctly as it should have that in this timeline there is no World War II. I don't know if that's even worth discussing, but isn't that the weirdest thing in the world for here? I don't know. I don't even have an opinion about it one way or the other, but holy shit, World War II never happened.
Yeah, that is pretty weird.
I don't know. What is this world like? Now I'm really interested because all of the United States' hegemonic power really came to fruition after World War II. So the United States that she lives in Montana when she sleeps in tarps is going to be completely different than anything that we can conceive of. Never mind. We're completely... Yeah.
That's a good question, though, because I feel like at the very, very minimum, this book could have capitalized more on the different visual aesthetic that it could have, since it's an alternate history thing. Because along with all the technology and stuff that got developed during World War II and all the political changes that occurred, there were tons of different artistic movements and architectural styles that they wouldn't have in this world. So things could be, I don't know, a bit more steampunk or industrial punk. I don't know exactly what you would call it, but maybe it got stuck in that grungy World War I visual aesthetic.
You think Jasmine Mas might have been a Hetalia fan?
I'm not answering that. No way am I answering that. Finally, after about 20 pages of hemming and hawing, we finally arrive at chapter 1. We meet our main character, Alexis, who lives in a trailer park in rural Montana. Her parents, who are her foster parents, spend their time making some kind of hallucinogen in the bathtub out of cleaning fluid and yeast.
Yep.
And they are both physically and verbally abusive to an almost comical extent. If it wasn't for how brutally and viscerally their abuse is described, I think it would come across as purely a joke. But because it does get painstakingly detailed for us, the ways in which they torture her, it doesn't really feel funny.
No. It's I don't know, the most mean-spirited cartoon. I don't know how to equate it to anything. I don't like these people.
This probably won't make any sense to anybody else, but when I watched Courage the Cowardly Dog as a kid, I felt like there was something truly evil about the way it looked and felt. And then I came back to it as an adult and was actually, this is just sort of a weird and creepy kids cartoon. But this book actually is the way Courage the Cowardly Dog felt to me as a child.
Yes.
It's mean, it's scary, and not in a fun horror way. And it's gross. It's grotesque. Anyway, just this morning, Alexis freed herself from being tied up by fracturing her own wrists to escape. While she's out in a field, she meets a giant, invisible, black talking snake named Nyx.
Hello, that's not funny, but just the way you present that information.
That's how it happens. That's literally how it happens. She just shows up.
She's just hello. Alexis hears voices.
Yeah, this is a fair representation of the book. This is what it feels like to read.
Nyx is I can't tell you why I'm here or who I used to belong to, but I'm here now and I'll hang out with you and be your friend and offer to kill anyone you don't like.
And Alexis is like, wow, my first real friend ever is a murderer. I'm so fucked up. Constantly. Alexis talks Nyx out of killing her parents, and she swears never to kill since it's a sin, and she basically looks right down the barrel of the camera as she says, I will never kill. I, Alexis Hurt, will never kill another person. It's wrong to kill. I hate killing. Fuck you for even thinking I would kill somebody.
Because she has this hang up with this figure in her life, Father John, who is... I don't know if they ever specify the denomination, because again, like with the World War II thing, I kind of want to know, like, what does a church look like with Titans attacking? Are they just like in denial? And there's like some hand waving where it's like, oh, Titans were put here by God to punish us or whatever. But like, she has this religious trauma in a way that I think is more palpable and better than even in like Crown of Starlight, where there's just this Father John in her head every time she does anything sinful, like name it, anything, swearing, sex, killing, that sort of thing. So it is really interesting, this like background that she has.
I'll give it that, because it just shows us Father John from time to time and never gives us a whole expository dump about who he is. It feels more authentic, like it feels more real than it would if like at one point Alexis stopped and was like, Father John was the evil pastor in my evil foster parents' evil church.
Right.
So later that night, a government agent shows up and forces the family to adopt a second foster child named Charlie. He is mute, or at least chooses not to speak. It's implied due to trauma, but he and Alexis will learn sign language together. It doesn't matter. They'll talk like that, and they quickly become friends. So Alexis has made 2 friends by the end of chapter 1. And aside from that biographical detail, what will already have become obvious to you, if you're actually reading this book along with us, is how much Alexis talks about wanting to kill herself and her parents.
Constantly.
It is just constant, and that and the Father John, and then a snarky response to her own interior dialogue in parentheses are like three beats that this book is going to hit over and over and over again, even within the same chapter. It's like whenever there could just be silence, there's Alexis joking about the thing that she just said, or it's Alexis threatening to kill herself, or it's Alexis fantasizing about Father John yelling at her. Like, it is obsessive.
Right, and that really elevates it from like, oh, kind of this quirky thing. Because at first I was kind of thinking like, oh, you know, it's funny when someone says, oh, I suck, I want to kill myself once because of something minor that happened in their life. But when you say it over and over and over, you start to think, okay, wait, there's something going on here that we're not addressing, nor will it be addressed here. But I did not think that it was very funny. I might have been okay with it if it were peppered in, but this is salted in. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot more salt than pepper in a dish. I don't know.
It was like a sine wave of concern, because I would be like, oh, this is a joke. And I'd be like, this is not a joke. But then I'd be like, well, she keeps doing it. Like, it must just be a joke and she's not funny. And then I was like, no, she's saying this funny. Way too much. It's definitely for real. Yeah, but like you said, something psychological and unaddressed is happening here. Okay, so chapter 2. Alexis's foster parents were kind of initially hesitant to adopt Charlie, and it turns out that they may have actually been onto something there, because a year later, everyone is like starving to death. They are having a really harsh winter in Montana, and they have run out of viable food stamps. Like, they still have some, she says, but it's for food that's like not available during that season, so they're as good as nothing. She calls on famous mathematicians Carl Gauss and Emmy Noether for strength. These are 2 people that she will think about, fantasize about quite frequently.
Constantly, yeah.
And she just references the fact that they are mathematicians. Like, never do we learn much about like why them in particular, or like who they even are, but she thinks about them a lot. Maybe something else to add to our little obsessive rotation. But anyway, she calls on them for strength, as one might some kind of Greek god. And then she defends Charlie from the physical abuse of their foster parents, who have basically conspired to kill Charlie so that they will be able to split the food between just 3 of them, as they used to do. she steps into this fight, and her parents like really brutally beat her. I'll save you the details, but Nyx comes to the rescue, which allows Alexis to take refuge in the bathroom with Charlie. Then, while the door of the bathroom is closed, something happens and their mom dies, and they hear her screaming for help, and their father is also screaming for help, and he's saying some kind of monster is attacking her. Mm-hmm. But when they leave the bathroom, the mother is just like gone, and nobody can really tell a clear story about what happened. Then the authorities show up, and Alexis says that her foster father is the one who killed her foster mother, and the authorities just arrest him, leaving her alone with Nyx and Charlie in the trailer.
That's it.
And she realizes that she has been blinded and deafened on her left side from the beating. And then this chapter ends with, the next morning, a big Federation truck shows up and takes the trailer away as evidence. Just the whole thing. They're just like out there standing on the side of the street.
So wait,
as a big car comically hauls their house away.
I have some notes, and I know we're trying to separate our sections, but I do need to voice these now because they won't be interesting later without context.
Mm-hmm. I got one too.
Anyone who has been in a trailer knows that they are remarkably thin. I do not believe that an apocalyptic level of monster attacks would stop just because you lock the door of your trailer, which is what Alexis realized. She's like, oh no, we forgot to lock up, or like a window was left open or something. That's how the monster must have gotten in.
It's like Weird Nova's playlist child logic. It's like, well, if the doors are closed and locked, the monster can't get us. Of course.
Right, of course. And there's a little bit of a foreshadowing that I want to make sure that we capture here, because I didn't understand what the hell was going on at first. Mm-hmm. But there's like a physical altercation between Alexis and mother and father, as she calls them, and she gets like into this like blood rage, or like she goes kind of crazy. They say there's a red devil or something like that, and she's like, oh, they're crazy, and then never thinks about it again. And but that's a little bit of foreshadowing for you. That's some writing that Jasmine Mas learned how to do from her English teacher.
Yeah, it's clear she got that one down, and she's really proud of her ability to foreshadow, seeing as at the end of the novel, she actually has a little flashback sequence where she lists all of the times she foreshadowed the big twist for you right there.
It's like a credit sequence.
It is. So, good job. I'm glad that you've mastered that. However, I do have questions about this moment where, during the moment when the authorities arrest Alexis's foster dad, when they put the cuffs on him and are taking him away to the apocalypse police car or whatever, one of the guys turns to Alexis and says, he's out of your hair, as though she's the adult, and also the police officers knew that this guy was like an abuser, but also if he knew that he was physically abusive, he's out of your hair is such a hilarious understatement. Like, he's not like a stray dog. He was like endangering her life daily. It just is like, what's happening? On? Why did he say that? What does that mean?
So that, I don't know. So that's Alexis's childhood for you, I guess.
That's Alexis's childhood. You can forget about it mostly, but we are. Well, I guess we're still going to be in her childhood after this 8-year time skip that we have on our way into chapter 3. So she's now in high school,
yes.
And she hates high school because she's better than everyone else, and is hoping that she's going to do really well on her dystopia SATs so that she can go to protagonist school.
Yes.
And she's really smug about not being interested in what Achilles and Patroclus, who are the two most famous Spartan heirs, are up to, which is something that all of the other girls and one gay guy in her class enjoy. There's like this like celebrity culture surrounding them, even though they're basically just like murderers for hire. The whole world adores them and finds them very sexy.
I'm sorry, Jay. It's actually Patro, because the average consumer of this book cannot pronounce Patroclus.
I'm not going to say it. I will be calling him Patroclus the whole time. I will not say the other one. It's poison to my ears, worse even than Lark Crown. I will not bear it.
Jay, do you think they call him Patro because of the Latin cognate implying that he is daddy?
That he's a daddy dom,
that he's
because
a daddy.
He carries his boyfriend around on a chain with a muzzle.
Because he carries his boyfriend around on the chain with the muzzle. If you guys are returning members to this club, what this book feels like to me throughout, and this is where this really comes to the fore, is the second part of Nova's playlist where the game ends and she just like, you think it's going to be completely normal, and then she turns on the TV and there's like a news broadcast of like a guy using zombies to combat street gangs, and she's just like, oh wow, the crime in this city is crazy. So this is what this feels like, is they're just like in high school on like what do they call it? Like the Falcon Chronicles or something. There's a name for the website. I may be getting confused with something else. And I think that's right. They watch broadcasts of the bloody duo or whatever they call them. There's what's it called? The murder duo? The Crimson Duo, not Bloody Duo. They're just like, ooh, he's so handsome. He's stopping the crime in our city. But otherwise, it's just a completely normal high school.
Yeah, it's just a normal high school. It's like exactly the kind of like campy, like YA high school dynamic you would expect. Like Alexis is like smug and better than everybody else because she doesn't like the thing that the other girls in her class enjoy. And okay, here we do get a little description of Achilles and Patroclus. So we get this little close-up of Achilles while he's killing a Titan on TV. And we learn that he has to wear this muzzle because his voice has the power to torture people. And so, as alluded to, he wears a muzzle all the time, and Patroclus is like his handler and like sometimes walks him around in public on a literal chain with this muzzle on. So very subtle, very subtle right away. Masterful demonstration of that literary technique. There's this weird scene that happens right in the middle of this chapter and then doesn't matter, where Alexis goes to the library to basically like stare at the librarian because she admires how one time she caught this one kid getting a hand job under a desk and she shot his dick off with a gun. And the librarian immediately just tells her to like fuck off, so she does. Oh, yeah. And she then goes to the principal's office to talk to the principal because Charlie beat up some kid off screen, and Alexis is technically their guardian, so she has to like give him a good talking to. But instead, you know, they just go home to their cardboard box fort that they live in now instead of a trailer, and they have a husky. And this has the same thing going on as Powerless, where like allegedly they're homeless and starving to death, but like it's super cottagecore. Like they have a little radio, they have some stuff covering the floor, so it's like they're not just sitting on the dirt. They live in cardboard boxes, sure, but they're assembled into like a little fort, and they've got a dog, and they do their math homework together under the lamplight.
Okay, I have not had direct experience with this level of abject poverty that is being described here. However, and also we're dealing with like a quote-unquote dystopian post-apocalyptic world. However, a society with a police force that can take your home away and set up public schools, which for all intents and purposes are indistinguishable from what we know now, except sometimes librarians can shoot your dick off with a gun. A society that has these things would have a foster home. Like, it doesn't have to be a good foster home, but there would be a building for children to go to. I do not believe that you could have, like, 2 children living in a box in rural Montana and have all of these societal things and have that specific aspect of civic duty not being accounted for. I think that's the stupidest thing on the planet. There was never like Payton in Powerless was not going to Loot Alley High School. You know what I mean? Like it. Yeah. I buy that Payton and whatever her name was, the woman who died. I buy that they could both be homeless and live in a trash fort and that be nice. I do not buy it in Blood of Hercules.
I could see Payton going to John Loot High, named after John Loot, just like Loot Alley itself.
Yeah, right.
It would actually fit right in. It probably would have given them something to do during the arc when they were still living there.
It might be.
I'm going to throw this in now because I don't feel like it's going to come up much later. But a lot of hay has been made on BookTube about how this book is homophobic, and it absolutely is. And one of the first instances of that is Alexis is like disgusted by how much all the girls in her class are into Achilles and Patroclus, but she's like double disgusted by the one gay kid named Tim Tom, who
she calls him Tim Tom. His name is not Tim Tom, but she calls him that.
He only goes by his actual name like one other time because every other time she calls him Tim Tom.
Yeah.
But whatever.
But there's not a gay kid running around named Tim Tom. We need to establish that.
Okay, fair. Okay, it's not homophobic for that reason. But like, the book goes out of its way to characterize him as like being more explicit in his expression of like what kind of sexual things he wants to do with these two men. And that is what makes the book feel homophobic. And like, it is annoying, but it's also like kind of juvenile in a way that I personally found it pretty hard to be actually offended by. I don't know, like it seemed like a lot of people online were like getting actually upset by this. And I was like, does this do harm? Like technically it like besmirches the good name of the queer community, but also like, I feel like we got to be able to tell when a book was written by somebody who's writing at a 7th grade level and we just kind of move on, you know, like it's whatever. It sucks, but it's whatever.
That's a really good point. I mean, obviously that's not something that I'm primed to notice to that degree. I just kind of took Jasmine Mas for a Fujo and glossed over a lot of these more problematic things that would be more noticeable if you were normal about it.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that this book has additional malice for the one gay guy, but it's also like, we don't need to do more than point out that that's there and move on.
Right.
Because this book has so many other problems that I think are a little bit more immediate, to be honest. So, like I said, Alexis is preparing for her dystopian SATs, and that involves trying to solve the Riemann hypothesis, which is something that she does in her free time. You might think that we're going to learn what that is, and I, out of spite, didn't Google it, hoping that the book would, if not explain it to me, at least tell me what it wanted me to know about this thing, but it never will. So she's trying to solve this thing, and she's banking on that being the thing that lets her get into college, basically. So then she goes to take the main character exam to determine if she's the main character, and lo and behold, she is a type of main character, actually, that no one has ever heard of. She's the mainest of characters, because part of taking this test is signing it in blood, and when she signs it, her blood burns right through the paper, which causes government officials, surprise, surprise, to show up, grab her, and teleport her into the God dimension, just like Nova's playlist.
And we will never go to school again. School is done. The trailer park is done. Well, the trailer park's coming back, but it's like mostly done. Like all of that was for nothing.
So here we are in God world. It's on Earth, but it feels so separate from everything else that it might as well be another fucking plane of existence. So she gets teleported to God world. She's in a coliseum, and it's time for the initiation massacre. Like literally right that second. There's not like, hey, you're going to be staying in this temporary holding location while we get the massacre ready. We're still bringing in some other students from, across the US. The last test results haven't come in. Like, it's going to be a day. Here's a moment to meet some of the other characters. No, it's just like there is an initiation, and it is a massacre. Yes, I and M are capitalized, and it's starting right now. So Alexis fights in the initiation massacre, where she is the only woman, and it is literally just a big fist fight in a coliseum.
Yep.
No weapons are allowed, so everybody is allegedly using their bare hands, but Alexis does cheat because, remember, her best friend is a giant invisible black snake that she keeps wrapped around her body at all times, so Nyx bites and kills people with poison, which somehow nobody notices. This allows Alexis to survive, and she is issued a mentor along with the other 9 survivors. And her mentors, surprise, surprise, are Patroclus and Achilles, whose job it is to prepare her for the next phase of main character testing. They immediately outright start talking about how much they hate her because she is an Olympian, they presume, rather than a chthonic like them. And then we are teleported again over to their mansion on an island. So
if anyone's familiar with Wattpad tropes, what just happened is Alexis got sold to One Direction. It's like, it's literally like the fan fiction thing. You know what I'm talking about, Jay? It's like
I don't. Wait, you should tell me what this is.
Well, no, it's exactly what it says on the tin. You know, the trope is you wake up one day and your gambling addict mother has paid off her debts by selling you to a rich benefactor. Usually it's not like an actual like slave trade thing. It's usually just a weird form of adoption to its credit. And then plot twist, it's Louis from One Direction or whoever from One Direction or all four of them at one point. I don't know. So it's just like a thing that like people do in fan fictions that I think is funny because it will happen twice in this book.
That's true. It will. Yeah, and this book did sell itself big time on tropes, like very explicitly, so no surprise that there's one right there in what you could generously call the inciting incident. Oh, since we're being good about mentioning foreshadowed things when they're foreshadowed, there is another thing that happens in this fist fight. There's a kid who like spills a bunch of black smog out of him, and that means he's chthonic, but supposedly there's no chthonics fighting in the massacre this year, so Alexis is like, how can this be? And that kid is one of the ones who survives the fight, so we'll be seeing him around in Main Character School Part 2.
Yes.
Oh, and I should mention, that because I thought this was interesting. So Alexis, when she was trying to solve the Riemann hypothesis, was studying to go to basically college. Like, there are a few colleges still open despite the apocalypse happening.
Yep.
And only, like, the top number of human kids can get in. The school into which she has just been admitted is a completely different one, unrelated to all the effort that she put in to learn all of the stuff that are required for the entrance exams to the school she wanted to go to.
Well, Jay, that's how fiction works.
Yeah, I guess so. I just thought it's sort of funny that there's like two elite schools and she got into the one she didn't want to go to.
Yeah.
And it's also like the one where like she had no agency in it, so like all of like the things that our character can do like matter not at all. Anyway, so she gets treated for her obviously quite terrible wounds, but they have like super high-tech healing stuff. It kind of works the same way as in Lightlark, where there's just like healing potion that you can pour on somebody, except in this it's like a cream that they'll use a lot, and it heals you, you know, it's a video game item. Alexis is drifting in and out of sleep as she recovers, as you would kind of expect, and when she wakes up, she refuses to let anyone, even a doctor, see her naked. And surprisingly, Patroclus ensures that a female doctor is the one to like to do the parts of the treatment that require her to be naked, which is like weirdly thoughtful of him. And we won't like see him be this way like ever again. So I don't understand what's going on here. It's like, it's endearing. Yeah. But then everything else he does completely counteracts it. So
I was expecting him to be like a Kit or Oro type of character, but like, no, he just goes back to being interchangeable with Achilles.
Yeah, he's just one of 4 identical evil men.
Is this where Alexis learns that Patroclus and Achilles use sign language to communicate with each other?
It probably is.
Good, because I have a nitpick that is only relevant here, because I don't really know a lot about ASL or whatever SL this would be, but I do know
Dolomite's that, SL.
Yeah, TSL. No, wait, that's bad. But what I do know is that, like any language, ASL has dialects. So I refuse to believe that 2 people in the foothills of northern Italy know the exact same sign language as someone in rural Montana speak. Because even like European and American have different sign languages, and like different dialects of American sign languages are mutually intelligible, but it's not the same. I think that's weird. It won't like be plot relevant because they're just like, oh, we should kill these creepy doctors for touching her later or whatever. And she's just like, oh, I know what they're saying now. We never really get any like dramatic irony stuff that we wouldn't have by other means. So it doesn't matter, but it annoyed me.
I thought she was gonna like not reveal that she knew sign language and then use it to like spy/eavesdrop on them or something, but that doesn't happen.
Nope.
Okay, like you said, no dramatic irony. Okay, this is also where we learn what that marriage law that was introduced in the prologue was. It goes like this. Chthonics are not allowed to marry only each other. So hypothetically, they could have a polyamorous marriage, allegedly, so long as it involved at least one Olympian. There's going to be another loophole later, but that's the idea. Like, they can't marry only each other. And in this world, the Spartans regularly marry polyamorously, so like that isn't even really addressed as being strange, which I actually thought was a good way of making that feel authentic to the world.
Yeah.
Alexis is finally a little bit more mobile, a little bit more up and about. There's this scene where she has a hashtag realistic depiction of a panic attack, thinking about Charlie alone while she's in the shower, but then Nyx helps calm her down. And throughout this chapter, we're on chapter 7 now, in case anyone's following along, she studies for the coming Crucible, which is going to be our real main character school, by reading a bunch of books that Patroclus gives her. This is basically the training that he and Achilles give her. Like, it amounts to this. There's a lot of lip service paid to them being her mentor, but they will never help her in any meaningful way. They will just be there to be mean to her and, I guess, give her books occasionally.
There is not one single didactic exchange between them. That's crazy. That's really crazy. It's literally called strategizing too, and it's just like don't die and fuck your way to the top.
So at the end of this chapter, she gets teleported to the Spartan War Academy.
God, the SWA.
SWA represent. Speaking of questionable depictions of poverty. There's a moment in the shower where she doesn't know how to use shampoo because she was poor and they didn't have shampoo. And I was like, come on, dude. Do you, Jasmine Mas, really think that people who live in abject poverty wouldn't be able to figure out how to use shampoo because they're poor? Do you think that poor people are just innately stupid? Like, think about that for a minute, man, before you write shit like that.
Yeah, that's crazy. I forgot about the shampoo thing. Also, I think even homeless people do bathe from time to time. There are, maybe not in this apocalyptic world, but like you can go to a truck stop or something. Like,
it's doubly ironic that it's like Alexis who can't figure it out, because she's like always all up on her high horse about being or all up on her high centaur about being like so much smarter than all the other kids at high school.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, well, you can solve the Riemann hypothesis allegedly, but you can't read the shampoo bottle?
Right.
Sure.
You know, it doesn't matter. We need to gloss over this.
Yeah, we need to keep going. Okay, chapter 8 kicks off with a tour of the famous SWA from the guy who's going to be teaching most of their classes and who is going to be consistently present but also static for the entire book, General Cleandro.
I hate him.
Like every other... Yeah, me too. Like every other adult in the story, he just likes to rage out and beat the shit out of kids for no reason. So he gives them a tour and he's like, here's where we keep the animals that you're going to bond with later. Here's the classroom. Here's the bathroom that you can't use because you're not allowed to use the bathroom during this entire thing, which is for several months, by the way. And here's the bedroom where you're not allowed to sleep because, again, no sleeping, no bathroom. Did I already say the classroom?
Yep.
And also, you're going to have to run this thing called the Crucible every time that one of you makes a mistake, and that'll be explained in a minute. But other than that, he's just like a mean guy who yells at them.
Yes, half of his dialogue is like in all caps, I swear to God. It's like crazy.
He's supposed to be like a drill sergeant character, but I don't know, I feel like usually in this kind of book, the drill sergeant-y character like has some kind of like moment where you realize he has a tender heart or like loves them in his own way or something, even if he's a flawed person. But no, he just likes to beat the shit out of them.
Yeah.
They do have their first class in this chapter as well, and that is math. And when a student answers a question incorrectly, his mentor like busts through the ceiling like Matthew Patel and Scott Pilgrim and is like, I will be the first one to make you all run the Crucible, which is this circuit that they have to run every time somebody messes up. And basically it just consists of running up and down a mountain, swimming across this river that they call the River Styx, while pursued by Charon, who will kill them if he catches them. And
is he pursuing, or is he just like vibing, because like he was just, I remember that we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I remember the first Crucible, they're just swimming and then he's just randomly hanging out on his little boat. It didn't seem like a pursual. I could be completely
they
misreading.
said he was going to kill him, but
Okay.
You're right. He doesn't ever, to my recollection. We'll see if my notes contradict that.
Yep.
Also, another moment where a character is like homophobic in like a weirdly obvious way. General Cleandro is like talks about this one gay student wanting to suck cock or something, and it's like very uncomfortable. Anyway, a son of Zeus named Christos tries to befriend Alexis, who at this point is presumed also to be a child of Zeus. But because she's like cooler than everybody else, she just basically shrugs him off. This kid then dies while swimming across the river as they're being pursued by Charon.
Like monstrously, like there's I don't know, like shadow demon attack, or I don't, it's something weird with blood and darkness.
This is important because this is another thing that's technically foreshadowing, but she and him, I think, shake hands before they cross the river, and they have blood on their hands, both of them, because they've been running the circuit, and their hands and feet always get bloody from running and climbing up the mountains. Then they start swimming, and Alexis thinks she sees Charon like touch his forehead, I guess like E.T., but instead of something Reese's Pieces, it makes Christos like scream in pain and explode into blood and then fall in the water. So that isn't actually what she sees, but that's what she thinks she sees. We then get this chapter basically again from Charon's perspective, and he's waiting with his invisible hellhounds named Hell and Hound for the initiates to get to the riverbank so that he can do his part and chase them down the river.
I don't know if I'll leave it in for dramatic readings, but at one point Jay compares him to Shadow the Hedgehog because he brings out a gun. And like this chapter, I encourage you to find a copy of this book, if only to read this one chapter, because it is delightful. It is like my original character, Cold Steel the Hedgehog. It's like, my hellhounds, Hell and Hound, were thirsty for blood, and so was I. I love to kill. It made me throb with anticipation. Like, it goes on and on. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, it is the funniest thing in the world to see.
It is literally exactly like that. Okay, so then we see this moment again where Alexis thinks that Charon is killing this kid. And actually that does turn out to be true. But Charon sees something else happen during the part before he touches the kid's forehead and actually kills him. What Charon sees is this kid like writhing in like a dark fog that seems to be like coming from Alexis. So we have this like conflicting POV thing, which I think is supposed to like introduce tension, but I just found very confusing because like I don't really trust either of these characters. So I was like, now I feel like I have two unreliable inputs.
Hold on.
Not making this clearer.
Jasmine, don't take that to heart, because I actually really liked this conflict between POVs, because I was like, when the Alexis chapter happened, I rolled my eyes. I was like, oh, here's Grimshaw Malvere. He's going to kill this little kid, but inexplicably they'll fall in love anyways. And then the next chapter, we get Cold Steel the Hedgehog, who I trusted, I took for granted because he grew up in this world. He's like, I definitely didn't start attacking this kid. Something really fucked up is going on with Alexis. And then I was like, oh, something's happening here. I get it. So I really did enjoy this, unironically. I was kind of being ironic with the Cold Steel the Hedgehog thing, but I'm glad that we can form this compromise of respect.
Imagining him as Cold Steel the Hedgehog might be the only thing that gets us through some of the stuff that he does later. I'm going to try that. I encourage you to try it at home as well. Back in Alexis's POV, they're in class. They learn that at 20, Spartans become immortal, gain extra intelligence. I don't know what that looks like, but they get smarter, I guess. And then they start to manifest their teleportation powers, which is something anybody who's a Spartan has to learn to do. Like, it's a power that you get, but it's like you have to actually get good at it, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
And they also gain the power to take oaths, which are basically like these mutually binding magical agreements. Most people, you have a maximum of 3 oaths you can take, and most people burn through 2 of them with the lifelong oaths of animal companion and spouse or spouses, which only leaves basically like 1 oath slot open. That will become important, I guess, in the sequel, since by the end of the book, Alexis has used exactly those 2 oath slots. So I don't know why they made a big deal out of the fact that, like, you only get 3, as though she was going to have to be competing or trying to figure out, if she can swap them out or something, a min-max, and make sure she has a good kit for the final boss of the book. It doesn't happen, so forget about it. Then there's, like, a bunch more school and tests and physical challenges, and we cut forward to August, where she is back with Achilles and Patroclus. She's on like a little weekend break from school. And she is using that time to like recover from her horrific wounds. And they allegedly strategize about how to survive. And this is where they say that thing, Andrew, that you alluded to earlier, where it's like, you can either fight your way to the top or kill your way to the top, but you're a woman, so we know which one you're gonna do.
Right.
And she's like, no, I'm not.
And that's it.
And that's it. And she doesn't. So, I mean, credit to her for that.
So, I want to pause really, really quick. You may have noticed that we're not really talking about Alexis herself too much. Not what she wants, not what she thinks. That is because I don't think that exists at this stage in the novel. I mean, she has little quips about things, and she's like, oh, Carl Gauss would think I'm so hot right now, which is fun, but I barely understand why she's sticking through with all of this. She doesn't even want to be immortal, which is the only implied benefit of this. She is technically being forced into it, or her hand is being moved in that direction, but like there's not a whole lot of internal conflict other than like these vague, oh, I miss Charlie, oh, Father John would think this. And I don't know why that is, because this would be a very easy thing to just sweep under the rug with a little bit more angst. I don't even know what it would look like.
Yeah, like, why doesn't she try to run away? And I know that if by some slim chance there's a fan of this book listening to this, they'll say, oh, well, Jay, you know why, because it's the next thing in your summary that I can see for some reason. And it's that Charon threatens to kill her and then bring her back from the dead and torture her forever if she kills herself to prevent Achilles and Patroclus from successfully mentoring her, which will allow them to become generals in the Spartan army. Like, that's why she doesn't do it. But, like, she doesn't want that to happen. So I'm back to Andrew's question. Like, what does she want? Like, what is she after? Who is she? What are her interests? We know basically nothing about her other than, like you said, the snarky comments thing.
Yeah, I keep trying to say the phrase proving a negative, but I don't think that's appropriate here. It's just like we know everything she doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
And not a lot of what she does. And I know that we're in a conflict of interest because of how many people are like acting upon her, and to some extent this is going to be unavoidable. However, I just think a little bit more time could have netted us a lot of benefit for this.
I think if she at least put up some kind of meaningful resistance to it, like made it clear that she has aims and desires as a character, that would be a huge improvement. There's like a whole bunch more of them like going to school and running the Crucible and them taking tests and Alexis like not being able to like mentally stay intact throughout all this. Like, time keeps warping, I think is the phrase that the book uses a lot. And like she keeps losing track of what's happening, like she's delirious. And somewhere in here we come to meet Augustus, who alongside Charon, Patroclus, and Achilles is one of the Spartan heirs. So obviously Achilles and Patroclus are her guardians and mentors. Charon is like this scary assassin dude who rides around on a boat, and it's unclear to me if he rides around on a boat because at some point there was a historical Charon and he's doing it as an in-world nod to that guy who might be his ancestor, or if he's on a boat just because Charon, the character that we in the real world know, is usually on a boat. And not Lauren Roberts, Jasmine Mas wants to signal to us that she knows this thing about Greek mythology and thus establish some kind of ethos with us, the reader. It could be either, it could be neither, but I don't know. Charon's the guy on the boat with the guns, and then Augustus is his cousin and also like a teacher at the school.
Yeah, he's also a professor.
He announces that in 2 weeks, the Crucible is going to become easier because the group will be getting some more time to themselves, which they'll have to use to bond with animals, because all Spartans have an animal companion. And this is like a light lark ass creature moment here, because almost every single animal that any Spartan we meet is bonded with is just like animal plus color plus optional bizarre feature.
Yeah.
So there's like a gold toucan. There's a silver eagle with a long tail. There's a red raccoon. It is literally like Scribble Knots ass descriptions of creatures. But that's going to happen, and it'll be good for the students, I guess. Is weirdly obsessed, Augustus is. He's weirdly obsessed with Alexis. And she starts becoming quite uncomfortable with it for good reason, I think. He tells her to take better care of herself, but like in a threatening way. And then he very, very obviously implies to her that she's chthonic, but she doesn't get it. And it just is another moment where it makes her seem like completely stupid. Like,
yeah.
he's literally Xavier's dad dying in the arson attempt at their house, and he's like, "It was you who killed me," and she's Xavier going, "What kind of stupid name is you?" Like, he's beat for beat the same joke, but the book doesn't seem to get that it's a joke.
Right. That's a good pull. I'm sure all of our listeners will get that one, Jay.
You know what? The ones that do will appreciate it. I guess all of this running the gauntlet has weakened her resolve because another random boy from school decides to approach her and broach the idea of an alliance. And this is some guy named Drex. I believe he's actually the kid who Alexis thought she saw unleash chthonic powers at the big fight, right?
Yeah, so this is not some random boy, like you're saying. He was so scary in the massacre initiation or whatever they call it. And he's also just kind of been like brooding and quiet this whole time because people think he's like chthonic and scary or whatever. So like this has been... I don't have an analog because I guess Charon here is Grim. This is like Grim Jr., this little scary man. So yeah, he's really bad at math or whatever. So he's like, let's form an alliance, and in exchange, you can tutor me math. And she's like, let's do it.
Yeah, and so if you thought he was like scary before, from this point on, he's just kind of like a dopey little guy who's like, "Oh, Alexis, can you help me with my math homework today?"
Yeah.
And she'll be like, begrudgingly be like, "Yes, I will." And then she will. And that'll happen about a billion times, a golly gee trillion times. Then we get a chapter in Augustus's point of view, and it's like the same chapter we just saw, again, like with the Charon thing. I left this out of the summary of the Alexis chapter because it doesn't matter, and I guess because I'm going to give it here. But basically, there's like a fight, and Alexis wins the fight by smashing a chair over somebody's head, and Augustus breaks it up. He is convinced that women should be too weak to compete in the Crucible, and that Alexis's participation is meant to be a feminist statement of some kind, and he is mad at her for that presumed goal. Like, he thinks it is morally a necessity for women to be pure, whatever that means, and like sort of homebodies. And he just assumes that Alexis is taking part in the Crucible to spite him for these weird beliefs that he has, as Andrew alluded to, already admitted are seen as stuffy and conservative, even in some Spartan circles.
Yep.
So it's like, this is some weird... Something is going on here psychologically. I don't know what, but something's happening.
I almost wish that Augustus were right, and that was Alexis's goal, because as we just mentioned, she doesn't really seem to have a lot of personal skin in this game other than not wanting to get resurrected and tortured, and not wanting anything bad to happen to Charlie, and not wanting this, that, or the other thing. But even if this was like a early 2000s women get it done style feminism, I think that could have been just as well and perfectly serviceable for this kind of story.
We could have come away from this book, spoiler for one of my big critiques, but we could have come away from this book with the feeling that it actually like has a point. Anyway. You were pointing out that like so much of what we know about her is like a negative. It's like she doesn't want to do this and she makes fun of that, and she's very reactionary in that way. And I think that like it contributes to this feeling that she just like sucks as a person, because no matter what other people are doing, and granted many of the people in her surroundings in this book are doing bad things, but no matter what she sees people doing, like she has some snarky comment, some like mental put down, so that she can like reassert that she is like a better, smarter person than they are. But then she never ever puts any skin in the game of proclaiming, you know, like what she actually wants, right? Or it gives the impression that she's a character that's like super afraid of being wrong and of being vulnerable. But that's something that the book like doesn't address or explore, which makes it seem like, I don't know, just uncomfortable and strange.
Right.
It's like kind of, it's reactionary in the same way that like the morality in the Noah books is reactionary. It's like God says don't do this, this, and this, but like what does God want us to do? Unclear, other than just worship God.
Yeah.
So I don't know, something there.
Going back to the feminism angle, that fight that we were alluding to, the character involved with that, named Titus, I do think is worth addressing here in our summary, because it's kind of like in the Crown of Starlight episode with Theseus, and we talk a lot more about it in Not an Audiobook, where everything he says is, you're a stupid bitch and I hate you because you're a slut and you're another misogynistic epithet and that's why I'm going to fucking kill you. And it's just like, it's like the parents, where it's so horrendously bad that it loops back around to being funny. Like Titus is like a screeching misogynist with every word he says in a way that, I mean, I don't experience misogyny, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. And comment section, let me know if I'm speaking out of turn. But the level of misogyny I feel Titus exhibits is not reflective of the misogyny that has come to the fore in the 21st century. We don't get a lot of people doing like, I'm gonna kill you because you're a slut and sluts are weak or whatever. It's so weird.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty diplomatic way of putting it, Andrew. Yeah, like obviously I don't experience misogyny either, but I have a somewhat difficult time imagining that this is a occurrence that is representative of many women living in America and the Western world at large today.
If you're a woman in the Western world, please let us know if we're off base here.
If you're a woman in the Western world, please drop a pog in chat.
Okay, all right, so we got to get past this fight because she just like breaks a chair over his head.
She breaks a chair over his head, and we see it happen in Augustus's POV, and he gets a hate boner looking at her being good at fighting. The end of chapter. He yells at her. Why are the animals acting like I'm some terrifying monster? Apparently, I was hard to love. Purple bees buzzed, and neon blue butterflies fluttered about. Do you want to be my protector? I whispered pathetically at a chunky bee who could barely hold its round body aloft. It gave up trying and spiraled to the ground. Relatable.
That's clearly lifted from Nightbane when she did the animal collection thing.
Notice how she has to go back to the menagerie multiple times to bond with her potential animal protector. Clearly, it's a reference to the hit game Hades 2, now in early access. So after that little aside with Augustus, we're right back in Alexis's POV, and she, after more school, heads back to Patroclus and Achilles' place. Charon also hangs out there sometimes, and he corners her when he runs into her there, and he's like Augustus, he's like, I know that you're up to something. I know that you know the full extent of your powers, and you're just not telling us. He is actually wrong about that. And he threatens to kill her, but he doesn't. And later he will threaten to kill her and then freak out at himself for doing it and like have like a weird breakdown. So I don't know why that doesn't happen here, but it doesn't. Whatever. Then she goes swimming and she gets spotted by some paparazzi that have somehow made it onto this island. And
they're, what are they called? Titan chasers? Spartan chasers?
Spartan chasers, I think.
Yeah, because they were, I mean, I know it's supposed to invoke storm chasers, like the people who film hurricanes.
Alexis is like, oh my god, you perverts. And then Charon shows up and he goes and like grabs them off the rocks where they're hiding, and he brings them out to the ocean and like gets them down on their knees and executes them in front of Alexis. Like literally like gun to the back of the head, like Shadow the Hedgehog does to Sonic in the opening cutscene of Shadow the Hedgehog for the GameCube.
My God.
Just like pops a couple in them. And they wash away, and then Alexis is like, well, that just happened. I'm going to go to bed now. And she goes to bed, but her night's not over. No. Because as she's trying to sleep, she hears weird noises from the pool deck below her room, and she watches Achilles and Patroclus have oral sex. And then she's like, well, that just happened times two. Right, and she goes to bed for real.
Worst night of her life. She doesn't even react much to it, positively or negatively, which,
no.
I don't know, maybe refreshing, maybe nice, I
guess.
It's consenting adults and all that.
It's weird that she has such a non-reaction to this, but she hates it when Tim Tom talks about wanting to have sex with men. Oh, she hates it.
Well, it's the talking, it's not the doing. I get that.
Oh, okay. I see. She's like, show up or get off the court, or whatever they say in sports.
Whatever they say in sports.
So after a lot of talking about it, we actually get to see the menagerie, which is like this big oasis in the middle of the mountain that's like sort of sequestered off from the rest of school. It's like, it's got a big hole in the roof. It's like a cave, but like with a hole in the roof. So like sunlight pours in dramatically and illuminates like this inexplicably tropical, like lost world.
Yeah, it's Journey to the Center of the Earth kind of thing.
It's Journey to the Center of the Earth, basically. There's a bunch of animals that are colors that a child would find interesting running around. Like it's a cartoon. And some of them have weird features, like a squirrel with a fifth leg that one of the kids eventually bonds with, but it doesn't really matter.
No.
All the animals hate Alexis because she's just so quirky and weird and like different and stuff, but not like the others. And she basically like runs into this like weird husky-like creature, and it does a bunch of like physical comedy gags. It's like clumsy and it chokes on a stick that she plays fetch with it with. And I don't know, it like falls over in comical ways. And I don't know, they don't bond, but like that's the only animal that gives her the time of day. Then Augustus holds her after class, or maybe it's General Cleodius or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But somebody tells her that Zeus wants to see her before this upcoming event called the Symposium, which has been alluded to a couple of times. Basically a big party to celebrate that the initiates are like doing well. So Zeus wants to meet with her because, you know, she's presumably his daughter that he doesn't remember having. And Augustus is mortified that she's interested in going, and he pins her against a wall and tries to mind control her into not wanting to go. And it makes her like bleed out of her eyes, like hyper-realistic blood, and out of her ears and out of her nose. And it's like, it's so gory and the blood is so there and it's on her face. Oh my God. But she fights off his mental attack. And that's that.
That's that.
Just a bizarre emotional peak at the end of a chapter. And then it's like, and then we went to the Symposium.
Right. They do it anyways.
And then they go to the Symposium. So Alexis meets Zeus. They just have an awkward conversation. Like every other guy in this book, basically. He's just an outright misogynist. He's just like, I never thought a woman would make it so far into the main character winnowing event that we're doing right now, where we winnow the characters down until we find the main one. Women are supposed to be weak and fragile, and but bad. You're strong. It must be because you're my progeny. I am taking credit for your accomplishments, woman.
Yes.
And again, it's like, of course there's misogyny. Of course that kind of thing does happen, but like that?
Yeah. I don't know. When you're the god of misogyny, then, you know, maybe you get a pass to be like this.
That's true. If he was the only one like this, I think it might actually play kind of well, because it does resonate with like other understandings of Zeus that we've all kind of inherited. So she meets him, and it goes fine. It's sort of a non-event. And then the sirens show up.
Sirens!
Andrew, Sirens have been mentioned previously in this novel. They get this little aside where we learn that they speak a different language that nobody can understand. Like, no living creature other than sirens can understand it. And we learn that they have, quote, exaggerated secondary sex characteristics. So a bunch of basically naked, attractive people walk into a room and just start having sex with everybody. Everybody is immediately having sex.
So you pictured them as like normal people, more or less, but with exaggerated secondary sex characteristics?
I made their skin blue and I gave them gills on their necks.
Ooh,
but
yeah.
Other than that, they were just naked people.
I was picturing, I don't know why, this is not actual critique, but I pictured them as misbegotten from Elden Ring, the little guys with the white faces and the blonde hair. I don't know why. There's nothing to like give me that impression, but like that's what I was seeing with all these little naked men and women running around.
Let it be a warning to you, writers, when you don't describe your creatures, that we're just going to imagine spheres with claws or Elden Ring characters. There's not a damn thing you can do about it.
That's probably a problem with SBU English Club more than it is with writing.
No, this is representative of all humans and all readers. Everyone's having sex, except for Alexis, who doesn't want to. Right. This one siren comes up to her, though, and like starts talking to her. And Alexis is like, holy shit, I can understand this lady. And the siren starts like begging, and I mean like begging on her hands and knees. It's like all of a sudden like the emotion of the scene like inverts, where one moment it's like this sort of like there's like a sense of awe to it when the sirens appear, because it's like they're beautiful but like a little bit sinister, especially because Alexis isn't interested in having sex,
right?
And so there's like a scariness to it, but like a good scariness, like in a way that like makes an interesting story. But then it becomes like sad scary. Alexis and Nyx have this like snarky conversation aside about the fact that Alexis can understand the siren. Like the siren is like on her knees, and then Nyx and Alexis are like, monsters, am I right? Crazy that you can understand that. Like that's their takeaway from this.
Yeah.
It is
very weird.
I mean, it's like horrifying. It's sickening. Like I was like so put off by the whole thing. And then we have this chapter transition, and all of a sudden Alexis and the siren, who we learned is named Lena, decide to sit at a table and play cards.
Yeah, they play strip poker.
That's not a joke. They just play strip knife poker.
Basically.
And some other sirens see them doing it and are like, that seems like more fun than having sex with these people. And Alexis is like technically a Spartan, so like if we play cards with her, then like we're doing what she says, entertaining her, so it's like technically within the job description. And they all just play cards.
That's it.
But it then gets a little weird because Alexis is drinking this drink that the sirens are giving her, and she gets kind of tipsy and strips, basically, or starts to strip, and one of the sirens prompts her to. And Charon and Augustus, who are also there, just freak out. Like, they're like so possessive. They're like, you're mine. You can never do that.
Yeah.
And they haul her away. Like, Augustus actually picks her up and drags her out of the party like an evil, abusive boyfriend. She then wakes up later in the academy after being dragged off and finds a handwritten threat that orders her to disappear from Spartan society or else. This is all in the same chapter, by the way.
Right.
And she keeps acting like so nonchalant about it. Like, and then she learns that Drex, again, the kid who she has been tutoring and previously thought used the chthonic powers to kill a bunch of kids during the initial massacre, didn't do it because he reveals his Spartan powers to her, proving that he doesn't have chthonic powers. So, huge, confusing chapter where so much happens. Like, it's so much like emotional not emotional conflict. There's just so much contradictory, like emotional energy in that scene or that chapter. Like you come away from it just like, I feel exhausted. I'm
glad you had like a pretty similar takeaway about the siren scene that I did, because like, wow, there was something deeply, deeply wrong at a core level of that scene, and I couldn't really name it quite right until you laid it out like that. It's just like, I don't know, it makes me nauseous. It's like this book already can't decide if it's like funny or serious, and then you introduce like this industry of sex slavery, and Alexis doesn't
do anything about it.
Right.
She just lets it happen.
It's really bad. Really bad. But I don't think we see too many sirens until we find one of them dismembered later on.
Right, yeah. So there was a guy siren sitting at the table with her. Remember that for later. In the meantime, we go back in time a little bit to see the symposium scene from Charon's POV, and basically all that happens in it is these sirens are crawling all over him, trying to offer him sex, and he's kicking them away literally as he's sitting at the piano playing it. And he's like, "I'm only for Alexis. I'm saving myself for her." And then he like starts masturbating, like fully on-screen masturbating as he plays the piano and watches her play cards and then start to strip, and then he intervenes. End of chapter. Back into Alexis's POV, but not even back where we were. We go like further a few months ahead. And she's reading the newspaper, which announces that Charon and Augustus have both sent out the traditional chthonic wedding gifts, although their recipients are unknown. So like everybody's like, ooh, these heirs are going to get married, but who will it be to? Can't
Nobody
imagine.
knows.
We also meet Augustus's younger sister, whose name is Helen, and she's just there. She lives on the Achilles and Patroclus Island sometimes.
She is really just there.
She's like peppy and likes fashion, and Alexis finds her mildly irritating because of how peppy and enjoying of fashion she is. Forget about that, because we're already back at school, back at the Crucible. There's a Titan attacking them at the Crucible. Whoa! And then Charon comes to the rescue, and it's literally happening this fast. Like, Charon sweeps in, and he threatens Alexis with a knife. He's like, "You should have been more careful when the Titan attacked. You almost let it kill you, and now I'm almost going to kill you." But then he gets really mad at himself for doing that, and is like, I'm so sorry. And he's like on his hands and knees screaming, and like the crazy emotional spikes are like Nova's playlist, where it seems like everybody is like totally dysregulated and insane. So then he takes her to a doctor, and the doctor is like, we need to get her undressed so that we can help treat her for all these wounds. And Augustus and Charon threaten to kill the doctor for trying to touch and look at her naked body. And they're like, we'll apply the healing ointment ourselves. And so they do. And then we get a chapter in Augustus's POV where he mind controls the doctor to kill himself because he wanted to look at and touch Alexis's body to treat her. But
to be fair, he did.
To be fair, the doctor is a pervert.
Right,
he is a pervert.
Right.
But the thing is, we don't know that at first. No. And actually, Augustus doesn't even know that until he starts mind controlling him to kill himself. Like, initially, Augustus and Charon are mad for completely unreasonable reasons, and this isn't the first time they've threatened to kill a doctor who wanted to touch her. This is the first time they actually do it on screen. But anyway, the doctor does turn out to be a pervert.
That repetition is very interesting to me. If you're a woman in the Western world, comment below on your take on this. Maybe it's because of like, you know, doctors' famous inability to properly treat women's issues that there's so much vehemence in this book towards doctors specifically. Like, there's the siren, but the only other examples of like wanton murder for relatively minor or not even infractions or threats of murder, I should say, is with doctors. It was like that in the beginning when Patroclus and Achilles were talking about murdering people and that were just trying to heal her, and then this doctor turned out to be a pervert. But again, what is it with Jasmine and doctors, I wonder? I mean, I don't like doctors either, question. But like I wouldn't want to murder them. Like, I don't know.
I'm getting crazy Empress Teresa flashbacks, because do you remember how many times that book was like, I hate journalists in the mainstream media?
Yes. It's exactly it's like the same that.
Thing. It's the same in the sense that it's like weird and it seems like it might be a hang up of the authors. This one's obviously way more severe and probably way more justified if it is that. But like, it's the same thing, and it's like I have a bizarre hatred for this profession that is incidental to the actual contents of the story.
Right. And I don't know. Anyway. I could see it explored more, but right now it's just like this weird like Freudian thing that I don't even know if Jasmine is aware of.
Yeah, I don't know either. If it is meant to be like a critique of the way that women get treated in like the Western medical system, that's awesome. I'd like to read that. But like, it is not succeeding in being that yet.
No.
We also then get a chapter from Charon's POV real quick where he and Augustus basically just like vaguely discuss this vague plan that they have for Alexis's future. Like they completely like non-talk about it. Like they're just like, you know, the thing, right? And then Augustus is like, yeah, the thing that we both know about. And Charon's like, that's the one, that thing. And there is a suggestion that they have both fallen for her, if it wasn't already obvious, and there's some kind of rivalry bubbling up between them, which is so titillating. I'm titillated. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah. You know me. I love it when creepy men fight over women younger and more immature than them. I think that's the hottest thing in the world.
Men who run her school.
Men who run her school.
That they are forcing her to attend.
In positions of authority over her. Yep, I can't think of one thing that's hotter than that.
Okay, back to Alexis's point of view. We skip forward again, this time to December. The only meaningful thing that happens here is that Alexis name drops Charlie around Augustus, which causes him to freak out, thinking that it's like some suitor.
Boy. Yeah. He's like, who's the fuck is Charlie? I'll kill him.
Yeah, he pins her to a wall, and he brushes his cheek against hers, and she's like, oh, his stubble is so hot, but I'm so scared. And it's like,
you're in danger.
It's weird.
Yeah.
He knocks her out, ? And then drops her off in the menagerie ? And she bonds a little more with that weird malformed dog that I mentioned. And then she gets another warning to disappear from Spartan society.
Yes.
Like another handwritten note. This happened with the last note as well. But she gets a box that has some body parts in it.
Yeah, basically. Like eyeballs and a finger and teeth.
Yeah. The last note the last box, which arrived at the same time as the previous note, like had the eyes and teeth or fingers of like the one male siren that was sitting with her at the table. And she's about to get another one, but first she gets this other note that like warns her to leave. And it's super like hard to tell what actually happens, like literally the events that happen in this moment, because Augustus knocks her out, drops her in the menagerie, she has this bonding scene, she gets the note, and then she like gets sick or something, and she has to leave school for a little bit, and Augustus is like talking to her like through her haze of sickness, and he's like, I'm gonna protect you, babe. And he's like being like very doting all of a sudden. And like the way that it's paired immediately with his like aggression reminds me so much of Ransom. It's like a way more hyperbolic version of Ransom from Wild Animus, where he's like obviously abusive to Lindy, but then he like will be nice to her in the way that like a real abuser would be. So it's super strange. Again, uncomfortable. I know I'm unusing that word, but I'm trying not to go off into criticisms yet. So all I can say for now is that it is strange. And then she's back at school, like nothing happened. Like I literally don't know like if she got sick from his mind control powers and it just took a minute to kick in, or if seeing the note freaked her out, or what. But like all that occurred.
Combination.
And then there's another bonding scene with the dog in which she actually bonds with it once and for all, and there's like this extended description of the way the magic like connects them like a thread. But it's played for comedy, because the reason she bonds with the dog ultimately is because this other kid dared her to do it, and she does, and then she's like, now I'm stuck with this stupid weird creature. It's like so ugly, am I right?
Wait, so and then, that's another example of like her agency being in question here. I forgot about the dare thing. I thought it was just kind of a slow burn animal bond or whatever. But like she does it because someone else told her to. Fluffy Jr.
Fluffy Jr. is the name of the dog. It's kind of the same thing that happens with the school. Like she's studying to go to college, but then instead of going to college, somebody swoops in and takes her to a different school. She was actually bonding with Fluffy, but then she doesn't do it because like she likes the dog. She does it because somebody else tells her not to, but through reverse psychology, like tells her to, basically. So why can't she just make choices? Why can't a character just make choices?
Great question.
Then we're back in the classroom. There's another bizarre scene that like doesn't feel like it quite hangs together with the other ones, where Augustus like tries to mind control her. This time his purposes for doing so are unclear, but she successfully fends him off. And then we're right back into these school montages again. Yeah. And during one of them, she goes back home, or not home, but like to the Patroclus and Achilles resort island. And Patroclus has this bizarrely sincere conversation where he's like, hey, I really appreciate you not falling for Achilles like so many women do, and it's really annoying because he and I are like monogamous, even though we're both bisexual. But like, you've been very chill
Really
about
that
and I appreciate it. Yeah, it was very subtle. Back at school, there's a scene in the library where Maximum, who is one of the other students, he hasn't really mattered this whole time.
I forgot
he kisses her by the fireplace.
Yeah.
And her consent is ambiguous.
Very.
But he does. And then this is when we get the second box. His lips show up in a box delivered to her. And finally, school is over. And it's time to go to the big ball to mark their graduation.
Let's go.
And as we transition into that, Alexis and Helen have a getting dressed montage.
Oh my god.
How would I compare this one to Light Larks and the current reigning victor of dressing montages, Crown of Starlights? Definitely somewhere in between. It's more detailed than Light Larks, but it also sucks because all the outfits are like things a cartoon character would wear, like a bright pink dress covered in sequins, and then the thing that she ends up going in, which is like a big...
Right. Well, yeah, and I actually hate this more than like anything. I don't remember having too strong of an opinion about the Light Lark, but I also enjoyed it in Crown of Starlight. But the thing is, it is implied that Helen is supposed to be annoying. But Yahtzee Croshaw once said that purposefully annoying and accidentally annoying are still both annoying. So it's like pages on pages of Helen being like, oh my god, that is so not your color. You need to, have you ever been color graded? You need to be color graded. My brother is so protective. Ha 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 ha. And it's just like so grating. And like, again, Alexis also isn't having it. So it's not like I'm not supposed to be feeling this way, but it doesn't make it any more pleasant or bearable.
The only thing that I can conceivably imagine this scene wanting us to feel is like on Alexis's side, which then just makes us like a person that's like putting down a woman and getting glee out of it.
Right.
Like Alexis in this scene is literally like, I'm not annoying like this girl. Like she just cares about clothing.
Right.
And by corollary, the reader is also supposed to be feeling that way. And it's like, I don't want to feel that way. Like, Helen seems like she's having a good time. Like, is she childish? Sure, but she also sheltered. Like, she grew up...
And she's
like,
also 16.
Teleporting from mansion to mansion. Like, what does she know? Leave her alone. So they go to the ball.
Yep.
And it's a ball.
It's pretty scary.
Andrew, do you want to talk about the furry ball?
Yeah, they all wear like weird animal masks, and they dance around.
They wear fursuit heads.
Yeah, fursuit heads. Technically,
they wear actual fursuit heads. They're oversized animal masks,
which I thought was very fun. She wears a lion, right?
Yeah.
She wears
an animal that has had no significance to her heretofore.
An animal. I don't even think that is even remotely related to Zeus, other than like the general theme of kingery. I don't know.
I think it's because Hercules is often depicted with the skin of the Nemean lion that he slayed, but he wears sometimes like as a cape. And I think it's supposed to be like foreshadowing of that, but it doesn't make sense in universe because nobody knows yet that she's Hercules.
Right.
And also, again, if it is that, then is Hercules a historical person who this is then an unknowing in-universe homage to? Or does this only make sense in our universe because we know that Hercules is depicted with lions?
I have no response to that.
Yeah, question as old as time.
Two scary men with distorted voices come up to her and say, "We're dancing with you now, baby. You belong to us." And it is very scary and very creepy. Alexis's consent is not only dubious, I think it is non-existent.
They just start grinding on her, basically, like really aggressively. They trap her between them and just start grinding on her like crazy.
But do they teleport her somewhere, or they just pull her away? I can't remember.
So what happens next is Helen and Patroclus like step in and like save her by pretending that like they have something to do over there. You know, the like classic like getting away from a weird guy at a party thing. And that is when somebody screams that the ball's under attack by Titans.
Yes.
And Alexis and Helen get grabbed and teleported
away
into chapter 28. Hey, stay out of my shed. So it turns out that the one leaving the notes this whole time has been this guy named Theros, who's a son of Zeus.
Theros at all. I know what you're talking about, but like I did not remember Theros existed when this chapter.
He has been the one who's been sending Alexis these notes, but Alexis is like, oh, so you've been sending me those packages too, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway,
Alexis is just like, oh,
I have you and Helen. Alexis is like, okay, and Theros is like, anyway, I have you and Helen tied up in my shed now, and it's just literally a shed full of bones and corpses, and he's like, this is my murder shed where I kill the children of Zeus because I want to be the only child of Zeus.
He turned Christos into a decorative toaster cozy.
And Alexis is, there's a moment where she's blindfolded and like she's like, the ground is really uncomfortable, and the blindfold comes off and she's like, oh my god, I'm standing on bones, oh, that's why it's uncomfortable. So then Theros is like, he's like, the Titans will be here any second. Smell you later, loser. And he warps away, and then sure enough, a Titan comes into the shed and starts fucking shit up, but by the skin of their teeth, Alexis and Helen are able to teleport to safety.
Yeah.
Now, it has been an unclear amount of time since they were kidnapped, because they were knocked out at some point, probably post-teleport, pre-waking up in the murder shed. When they teleport, they go to the Dolomites Coliseum, which is where the graduation ceremony was going to be held. And they teleport there literally as it is happening. The graduation is underway, and no one seems at all bothered or concerned or even confused by the fact that Alexis wasn't there, and also that Helen, again, sister of Augustus, has been missing. You know, Augustus, Mr. I will kill anybody who ever harms women. His sister has been missing for at least a day, and he hasn't done shit. He just went to graduation. So they're at graduation, and Alexis sees Theros in the stands, sitting under the House of Zeus banner, and she's like, I'm gonna kill you! And then she bum rushes him, and they fight, and she accidentally unleashes her chthonic powers, which it turns out
she has those.
Is torturing people whose blood comes into contact with hers. So then we get this thing I mentioned earlier where the book like flashes back to all the instances where somebody died mysteriously after her blood.
I think her parents or her foster parents,
her mom at least.
Yeah, her mom. Sorry, yeah, just her mom.
There was one other. Oh, during the initiation massacre, that kid who she thought was getting killed by somebody's fog powers was actually getting
Drex's
killed by her powers.
And,
and she just didn't like understand what was happening.
Right.
And it turns out that her parents are actually Hades and Persephone, which they're characters in this scene and this scene only, where they like walk out into the Colosseum and they're like, oh, our daughter, we love you so much. Where have you been this whole time? And then they disappear, and I was like, what the hell? But then I got to the end of the book and I realized that at least like on my copy, literally on the last page, like before, like the book ends and there's like a blank line. And then we haven't even moved into like a new section or a new page or anything. There's a paragraph that's like, to read a cool bonus chapter about her hanging out with Hades and Persephone, go to my website and join my mailing list. Right. I was like, oh, that explains that, I guess. So bold move on that one, Jasmine.
Did you read it? Did you read it?
No, of course not.
I noticed it because it's not in my book, but it's in the audio book. It was like something something. They're sitting around by the fire. Cerberus is over there lounging around, and I think Fluffy Jr.'s there too. Hades is reading, and he's like, hey, Alexis, do you want my magic helmet for your upcoming tribulations? And Alexis is like, yeah, but I don't know anything about Hades' helmet, and I didn't really pay attention, so I don't know what that means, but I know that it was very boring and bad.
I think in Percy Jackson it like makes him invisible or something.
Maybe it's an invisibility hat then.
I don't know if that's in actual mythology or if it's just from Percy Jackson.
We'll go with Percy Jackson.
Okay, so she fights off Theros, and like everybody is immediately like on her side basically because like it's obvious that Theros is evil, and Zeus is like, okay, yeah, I'll deal with him, but also, hey Alexis, do you want to marry one of my children? Like immediately just asks her that. And Hades is like, what are you doing? This is really weird of you. And Charon and Augustus also step in, and they argue that they have a right to Alexis since it turns out that those boxes with body parts in them were from Charon and Augustus.
Right.
And by opening them, she unknowingly agreed to marry them because by Spartan law, that is accepting their betrothal gift, whether or not she knew that she was doing it, and they now own her. So essentially, she has...
so this is the second I've been sold to One Direction moment in this book. Something else I want to point out, and this is implicit, you guys probably already know this, but what this is saying is that the notes and the boxes full of body parts are completely parallel to each other and were just lumped together by Spartan UPS, and because they came as a single package, Alexis just assumed that they were intrinsically related, which, to be fair, is what I also did, so I feel a little bit cheated with this twist, especially because who the fuck is Theros? Like, he doesn't matter. He doesn't do anything.
The only thing you need to know about him is he got to stay out of his shed.
I wish he were around more because he could have been like, stay out of my shed, and then Alexis could be like, I think he said that we were always welcome in his shed.
She would literally say that though. That's the sad thing.
She would, because she's like that.
She is like that. So she's gonna marry them. Like, it's just taken as forgiven. It's just taken as a given that she's gonna marry them. But in the meantime, she decides she's going to go get Charlie since she can teleport now.
Right.
They fly now. So she teleports and she goes and gets him from school, and the Chthonics like then ambush them basically in their cardboard box hut. And it's not a major moment in the chapter what I'm about to say, but there's a moment where Augustus is like, if you run away again, I'll chain you to the bed forever. And then he's like, who am I kidding? I'm gonna do it anyway once we're married. And it's like he's starting to rape her. Like, she at this point in the novel like unambiguously does not like him. There are weird moments where when he is in the middle of like sexually assaulting her, she acts like she's into it, or like the narration like flips and all of a sudden is talking as though she's into it.
Right.
But whenever that's not actively happening, she is unambiguously repulsed by him.
Right.
So like him doing this is just like, hey, I'm going to maritally rape you for the rest of eternity since we're immortal. Like, that is what he's saying. Like, this is not sexy. It is
sexy.
Gross. It's so gross.
Oh, yeah.
But on the bright side, she convinces them to let Charlie come live with them on Patroclus and Achilles' resort island in Italy, which is good.
Good.
And then we cut to wedding day, just like that. Nothing has happened in this interstitial time, I guess. She hasn't tried to get out of this any kind of way. No one has tried to assist her in that aim, despite the fact that she clearly doesn't want this. She doesn't even run away. She's just in her wedding gown, and she walks to the altar and says the oath, and like she feels really miserable this scene. Like the tone is suddenly very mopey, and they force marry her at the temple.
Yep.
And it just feels bad. It just really feels bad. Resigned and grim, and it's not fun at all. Like, she's not even joking as much in this scene. I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking reading this. It
It's such a whiplash too, because like there was a little bit of sweetness after the Theros thing where she's like, oh, Mom, Dad, is that you? And there's like a little bit of a cute moment. And then the very next time we see them, they are selling their child to be like a sex slave to two murderers. Oh God, yeah, it is very harrowing. And the officiant is the lady that dropped off Charlie from the beginning of the book. I don't know why this matters. Surely this is for book 2, but just so you guys know.
It's Ida, the prophet follower.
Oh, of course, yes.
Or Ada, or whatever.
Yeah, Ada, yeah.
Ada. But another thing that makes this so weird is that it's wrapped up in this like horrific nightmare logic where events just keep accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. Like 1 minute she's like warping back to Charlie, and then all of a sudden she's bringing him back to the Spartan world, and now she's getting married, and now the wedding is actually taking place, and her step parents or her actual biological parents that have just readopted her are like sitting in the pews like, we're so proud of you for being forced married, and she's like, I don't want this, but they don't care.
Right.
And oh my God. Okay, I don't even know how to talk about this next scene. Because...
So the officiant says, before you guys kiss the bride, we better get out of here. Everyone leaves. Everyone
leaves. There's one guy that doesn't want to leave because the guy's like, technically, I don't have to according to the law. And Augustus is like, you do want to leave. And he mind controls him so hard, his eyeballs explode in his skull. And he... leaves,
runs away.
And okay, before the thing that you think is about to happen happens, there is this bizarre cutaway to Patroclus's point of view, which we haven't gotten so far, and it's him and Achilles back at home scheming about wanting to date Alexis themselves. Yeah. They have never expressed this interest in her before. They will not for the rest of the book. Granted, there's not a lot of it left, but they're like, we're mad now that the other two Spartans married her. It should have been us. It should have been us. We're going to get her one way or another.
Which is not much better because they're still like, she's kind of a MacGuffin at this point.
Cut back to the altar. Can I just say it's an extremely, extremely graphic sex scene and leave it at that? Yeah. Can I just leave it at that?
Yeah, there's I don't want to do a play-by-play, but it is graphic, it is unambiguous what's happening, and the consent is dubious, which I guess we had on the tin, but I didn't realize it could get this harrowing. I thought it would be like convincing her in the moment to do it, but no, she is like not into it the entire, other than physically, she is not into it the entire time. And
it's so weird that she is not into it, but it's described in a way as though we are supposed to be enjoying it vicariously through her.
Which I did not, for the record.
No.
No. And this is where like everything starts to work against the book. Everything that the book establishes falls apart in our hands. The big thing, if you haven't noticed or you haven't read it, this is kind of the problem with this podcast, is we can't really get into the nitty-gritty details of the syntax and tone and stuff like that. Alexis comes off as a 13-year-old. I don't know, Jay, if you necessarily agree with me, but she comes off as not only a 13-year-old, but like I'm not being hyperbolic here, like genuinely neurodivergent. So it is like you have known this neurodivergent 13-year-old who really likes Carl Gauss for 35 chapters, and then right at the 36th, you get this, she gets assaulted. She gets kidnapped and assaulted, and I don't know, like, I'm trying not to be like too big of a prude about this, because again, there's a content warning at the front. I don't like the tone of it, but it tells you what you're in for. There's going to be dubious consent and forced marriage and stuff like that. But
isn't the thing that makes those tropes, I mean, neither of those tropes are things that I personally enjoy, I feel comfortable revealing, but isn't the appeal of tropes like that there's sort of like a tongue-in-cheek, like wink to the audience, like the characters don't like it, but really they do. Like everybody's actually like low-key into it. In this, there is no suggestion of that. She seems not to like it at all. Like these two powerful men have tricked her into being their shared sex slave for the rest of her life, and like she is going into this wedding dreading that future. There's nothing fun about that at all.
Right. She's not even like, I don't know, this is so gross, but like she's not even like a submissive person. It is like a switch flips when clothes come off. I don't know. This is one of those things where I guess it's taste, because this is like fictional dream logic world, and maybe to someone who is not like really into this kind of like versions of romance, it seems more egregious than it actually is. Like I've been on Wattpad, but like I've never spent a lot of time on Wattpad and AO3. Like I haven't gotten into this world. So for me, and I'm speaking for Jay as well, I assume, from an outside perspective, I didn't realize this kind of stuff was going on. Like I knew about the Sold to One Direction thing, but again, it was never like crazy or like really like dark from what I knew anyways. I don't know.
That seems like it's so juvenile that it's really hard to like be concerned by it. Like this has moments where it's that juvenile, but then it has moments where it seems so deadly serious, and they just are smashed up against each other.
I think it's the graphicness. I think it's if I had to point to anything to try to be objective and try to not come off as like prudish for someone who's like actually into this kind of thing, I think it's the graphicness of the sex scene. Like if it were, I don't know, if they were making out with her, and I don't think I would be reacting quite the same way that I am here, but like they take turns holding her down at one point, and it's optics aren't good. Don't mean to sound like an enlightened feminist, but I don't know.
So like Andrew said, switch flips as soon as they're done. Alexis is like, I don't want to be in this situation. And Charon starts telling her, like, apropos of nothing, basically, that he has been invisibly stalking her via his invisible hellhounds throughout the entire book. Like, you can mentally backfill that into this entire summary. He's been there watching her. And this upsets her so much that she passes out. And this is the last we hear of her until she wakes up in the final chapter. And she's like, I am going to kill these guys. There's two like POV switch chapters in between, one Augustus, one Charon, and neither of them matter. Nothing happens in either. Like she wakes up and she's like, I'm going to kill them, and that's the end of the book. Gotta be honest with you, Jasmine, I can see why this had your English teacher a little concerned. There's some things outside the scope of sort of the writing itself that raise some flags for me personally, but we will do our best as we move forward to talk mainly about the English club of it all.
Right. Right. So, if you're still around, I think we've gone through our little plot, and we'll move right on to the things we liked about this. Alexis was delicate, just like my sister Helen, and her soft features were twisted with pain. Every muscle in my body tensed. Men who hurt women didn't deserve to live. This is exactly why she shouldn't be participating in the fucking Crucible. It's a Kronos-damned outrageous dishonor. Chthonics were an endangered species, and it was my duty as eldest to keep the next generation safe. They were all depending on me. I wouldn't fail. No woman, no matter how strong, should ever endure the Crucible. It was dishonorable and wrong. I didn't fucking care if Aphrodite and Artemis said I wasn't progressive. It wasn't about women being as tough as men. It was about the fact that they shouldn't have to be. Spartan women were rare and needed to be protected at all costs. The future of our society depended on keeping them safe. I'm a male feminist, and this is my manifesto.
How are we supposed to be on this character's side? How are we supposed to have even slightly complicated feelings about this character? I mean, if we're going for morally gray, there's nothing gray about that.
Right. In 20 chapters, I will force a girl into a threesome / three-way marriage.
With my cousin? Whew. Well, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I feel like I just gave a very detailed lecture on theogenomics or whatever they called math in war school in Blood of Hercules. Can you tell me about a good thing in the... Yeah,
not Pythagorean. It's Thagorian. I don't think that's a thing. But okay. Yeah, I got a good thing, and I know you're not going to like this. So that's why I want to lead with this, because I think this is kind of controversial, and this is going to be a really messy episode because everything I'm going to say that's good ties into a bad thing, and everything I'm going to say that's bad ties into a good thing, which is hopefully going to be a good experience. I don't know. Sorry in advance. I did some soul searching and scrubbing through our previous episodes, and I have to say, Alexis is probably my favorite POV character we've had in this podcast. I like her a lot. I really, really like her. I think I'm verbatim saying what I said as early as like last episode. I don't remember when I said this, but I love Moby Dick. I love Moby Dick for the same reason that when I'm at a party and there's a drunk nerd around me, I get him talking about Warhammer, a thing that I do not give a shit about. But if you get a drunk nerd a whiteboard and ask him to talk about Primarchs, there's something so infectious about that, like, enthusiasm. So I mentioned it before in the end of our summary. Alexis comes off as neurodivergent. She doesn't pick up on jokes. She doesn't pick up on social cues. She doesn't like being touched. She is obsessed with mathematicians, a prodigy at math, and wants to literally have sex with Carl Gauss. And being wrapped up, she's annoying. Don't get me wrong. Like, she can be very annoying. There's a lot of times where I don't like her, but on balance, she's so interesting to just inhabit the mind of, just from like a perspective of like, yeah, she's kind of this weird rat freak sex pervert, and in a good way, you know. It's kind of interesting to see this point of view. And it really reminded me of, you know, when I was Lauren Roberts' age, right when I learned what syntax was. And I this is a true story. Like, I was really excited by this discovery. I was like, oh, I can use parentheses to create a sense of intimacy between the speaker and the reader. There's a lot of that there where you do build up, like, what I can only describe as a sense of intimacy with Alex. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of motivations, but you feel like you get her. You feel like you get what she's like to be around.
I think that's a really good observation. Coming away from this book, you definitely get a sense that you know everything there is to know about Alexis. Mm-hmm. You know all of her interests, few though they might be. You get super familiar with like her thought patterns and her verbal tics because she repeats them so often. And I think whether or not you actually like her will come down to how much of a tolerance you have for exactly what Andrew was describing. Right. Do you like inhabiting the head of like a weird freak who is often very unpleasant? Or would you rather feel like a little bit more distance from her that's maybe a little more comfortable because of how weird she is?
Right. And I mean, like, I've known girls who were like Alexis, you know, like Wattpad people who have weird obsessions with random historical figures that should not be considered as sexy. So there was something comfortable about that. And I think the way this ties back into a bad thing, right at the end of the summary, that intimacy that we form with Alexis is the exact reason I just was completely revolted by the sex scene at the end. And again, I'm trying very hard to walk this balance because, you know, that this is someone's thing, like someone's into this. However, we know everything that Alexis likes. We know everything that she dislikes. We know everything that she doesn't want to do. And just by exclusion, we may not know what she wants to do. But that's beside the point. It was always, I want to love Carl Gauss forever and bear his children forever. It was never like, I know this is kind of weird and gross, but it was never like, oh, I wish Carl Gauss would kidnap me and sweep me away and tie me to the bed. Her fantasies seem to be pretty vanilla and above board beyond the weirdness of it being Carl Gauss. So I'm just like, Alexis, this is not what you want. And I know it's not what she wants because not only is she not into it outside of the sex scene, but she also resolves to kill them. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not working. It's not working. I'm struggling to articulate it.
No, I think you're articulating it perfectly. It's like there's two separate characters. There's Alexis as we know her for 95% of the book, and then there's Alexis as we know her in the sex scene and in the swearing to kill them scene. It's like a different person. Like suddenly she turns into like a generic romantasy protagonist.
Right. And there could be two Alexises and have that work out. I don't know. Like I don't like trying to like workshop this like fantasy, but like that's what we're at here.
This is worse than trying to workshop the Christo-fascist propaganda, actually.
It is so much worse.
Yeah, this feels like criticizing like a secret part of people that they don't even want to tell you that they have until you accidentally like wound it. It's like very vulnerable.
Right.
Oh my god. One little thing that I liked was this phrase that gets reiterated over and over again, like mostly in the first third of the book, by like the evil Spartan men. There are no stupid gods because there are no stupid Spartans. I felt like that was a perfect little encapsulation of how arrogant and vain and like how much the Spartans just suck. Like they are so self-assured, despite the fact that they, like as a race, are at risk of dying out. They think they are so cool, and I feel like that was an efficient way of characterizing all of them like that. I wish that the novel had the confidence to leave it at that and not go on to make every single man be like, and also I hate women and want to kill them for being weak. Like, if they just said little things like this and then were, you know, like generally condescending, that would get the same idea across and like more convincingly. Right.
And that's a really compelling like irony too. And this is another good bad thing is it was ruined when the twist happened and it turned out Theros or whoever was like killing the spawns of Zeus. But I really liked the idea that Zeus's fertility was waning and the Olympians in general were waning in like power or like blood in some nebulous way, because like I mentioned, we've been doing this parallel mini podcast for Crown of Starlight. I am Greek mythologied out. So I saw the word Dionysus in this book, and I'm just like, oh, god damn it. Here we go.
No, again. Don't take me back. Don't take me back.
Right. Literally, it's how it feels. But like, and Zeus is still a misogynist. Zeus is still kind of this brusque guy. He's still lightning-y. He's who we think he would be. But this little like, oh, he's slowly decaying and his spawn are growing weaker and weaker by the generation. And then like, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I think Titus, the raving misogynist, I think he was a Dionysus. And seeing that and not like Kate Corain's interpretation of the character was cool. I know that there are many people who could view this kind of thing as a bad thing. A lot of people are, I don't know, mythology purists or would get annoyed that like, I don't know, Zeus is infertile or whatever, but it's cool and it's not immediately the first thing that I would think about. So points there.
It's different, and in a way, I think there is a way of reading it as cultural commentary. Like, can Zeus please die? Can Greek mythology stop being the default? Do we have to keep reaching into, to reference Yahtzee Croshaw again, this free ideas bucket? Like, can Zeus like stop producing progeny, conceptually speaking?
And maybe that's where we'll get one day. There's going to be a theomachy and in book 2.
That'd be awesome.
I'm interested to see where this will go. Ooh, here's one. All the male POVs were delightful. Before the twist, all the male POVs were just the funniest thing in the world. It kind of reminded me, if you remember the Not My Home episode where Jay was like, I legitimately loved every time a non-binary character appeared and made it everyone else's problem. I loved every time a man appeared and made his masculinity everyone else's problem. All of them are like, I'm brooding so hard because nobody loves me, but I love women and I need to protect them except for the weak ones. But it's not because they're weak, it's because they're too pure for this world. I've been tortured all my life and I want to torture more people. And it's just like,
it's a Greg Onisi on YouTube wet dream right there.
It is. And this shows like Greg Onisi on YouTube's benefit is in these bite-sized chunks that do not take up the entire corpus of the book. They are so much more palatable and so much more charming, where I'm just like, okay, Shadow the Hedgehog, you have fun there.
They're definitely endearing because we have like a precedent for this kind of character, like via fan fiction for sure. Like in concept, they're scary. If you met a real person like this, they would be unsettling, and you'd probably be checking their social media to make sure they're not posting pictures of their school and them outside holding guns or something. But like in fiction, they're like, you know, they feel harmless because they're so insistent on how like tough they are.
Ooh, sorry to monopolize, but I want to continue on that thread. This isn't necessarily a good thing, but I want to talk about like they're so much more entertaining in fiction because they're not a threat. And I was really hung up on the character of Titus because like I beg you, authors, the English language as a whole, we SBU are speaking to you directly, every single author on this planet. There are a million misogynists out there and a million forms of misogyny in which you don't call someone a bitch every single sentence or come up with some other misogynistic slur in your head. It is like cartoonish, and it delegitimizes in my head a lot of like
the own goal.
Right. And again, if you are a woman and I'm out of line, please comment, because I don't experience misogyny. I only know what I have been told and exposed to through cultural osmosis. But what scares me, I'm going to say as a feminist unironically, but as a feminist, what scares me is not chest-beating freak weirdos who say, I'm going to kill you for being a slut whore, and like shit like that. What scares me are people who are like, yeah, I'm a male feminist, I want to protect women. Like, you know, like that kind of thing, where it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing and born out of this like weird, misguided chivalry. It's like who's the guy in the falafel from Arthur? Neil Gaiman. If the accusations against him, which are currently not founded or not proven, turn out to be true, like that is a form of like threat to women that I find so much scarier and so much more realistic than someone like Titus in this book or Theseus in Crown of Starlight. And I just wonder why we keep falling back on these archetypes that, if they ever were realistic, don't depict, like, I don't know, gross misogyny like it does anymore. Like, is Titus a stand-in for the patriarchy as a concept? Like, obviously the answer is yes.
It happens because it's easy. It's hard to depict something. I mean, if you depict something like Neil Gaiman, which I think is founded but legally alleged.
Legally alleged. Sorry, not unfounded, but legally alleged.
Like, that is actually how that happens, because that is a real example of it allegedly happening. Like, and that makes it scarier and harder to deal with, I think. And meanwhile, Titus just being like so obviously bad. I mean, this is commercial literature, right? And this is like the commercialist of commercial literature. It is just a thing to consume and enjoy. So of course, like the easiest way to have a guy that we don't like is for him to just be evil. And then the reader can be like, I don't like that guy. And then he gets his just desserts and we all feel good. And when you're in, Lauren, what grade were you in again? 8th? Oh, wow. I thought it was 7th. Sorry. That's my bad. When you're in the 8th grade, Jasmine, since you guys are in that geometry class together, you sometimes are still developing like your characterization skills, and that's okay. And I think that like maybe it's just a little too difficult to really do the deep digging and also like social observation that it takes to be able to write that kind of story about misogyny. Like anybody can write Titus, because you could swap that in for anything. It doesn't even have to be misogyny. Like he could hate other guys and just always call them like a fuckhead or something. He'd be less bad because there's like less historical precedent for like massive oppression of like men of other men, but like it would still be the same idea, right? He's just a mean guy that we don't like, and when he gets killed we like it.
So I hear you. I think you're correct. But I think, despite being in 8th grade as well, Jasmine Mas knows what I'm talking about because of Augustus, because in chapter 15 Augustus is like, I want to protect all women. I want to protect all women so badly. And in chapter 35, he's like, Charon, hold this woman down as I have sex with her. She doesn't like us, but we've tricked her into marrying us for our own game. So that's the archetype I'm talking about. The allegedly Neil Gaiman archetype, where it's like, I'm on the front lines of defending women, but when it comes down to it, I'm not. So like, consciously or not, Jasmine gets me. I don't know why Titus is even there at this point, because he's a red herring both in the narrative and on broader like socio-political levels.
I think it's because, like, honestly, she probably just didn't spend enough time like thinking about it and working on it. Like, because anybody who actually like really did would have probably realized that there were similarities, or anybody who had this workshopped would have had somebody point out like, hey, these characters could probably be folded into each other. And honestly, Titus could be eclipsed by Augustus in that folding, because one of these has the potential to actually say something, and the other one is like a stock character that you picked out of a lineup.
Maybe she wasn't aware of the relationship between these two different figures as much as like we would be reading it. I don't know. It's these things that go unexplored and just lie next to each other with no connection in between. They just kind of make me question like what the process was here.
So many things in many of the books that we talk about like that feel incidental, and I think that that's usually a sign that, like, and it sounds mean to say it, but I think it's literally usually a sign that the author just didn't think about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't take enough time. And that's not like it's not meant to be like a like putting them down or something. Like the implication is that if they did sit down and like work on it some more, they could figure it out. That's what I hope to imply anyways. But I don't know. I think that this was written to get to the sexually exciting part. That talk about a place where you need an allegedly. Right. I think this was written to get to that moment, and so everything else it is incidental. Like it is in service of the climax, ha 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 ha, which is not even the climax of the story. It's more like the inciting incident. Right. But not to get into my critiques. Do we have anything else that's good about this book?
Nyx is good. I like Nyx. That was another like it might be just my own biases, but I liked the sassy little snake. It was a little contrived, but it gave Alexis like someone to talk to that wasn't sexual fantasies of Carl Gauss. And she said something that made me laugh. It was like talking about Father John, and Nyx is like, well, Father John sounds like a stupid idiot, like literally stupid idiot. And I was just like, okay, she's just like she's kind of dumb because she's an animal, but she's also sassy because she's a snake magic thing. So, and she's also called an echidna, which is funny because she's a snake, but also I think of Knuckles, talk about a Sonic the Hedgehog like we were talking about earlier.
Beware the snakes, though.
Beware
Blood of Hercules Light Lark crossover?
Yeah. there were definitely a lot of similarities.
I honestly think, now that you mention it, that Nyx could probably be replaced with a hallucination of Carl Gauss. I think that would be funnier, and I also think it would increase the tension in moments where Nyx is like, do you want me to kill this person, thus instantly removing the problem immediately at hand? And Alexis has to be like, no, don't kill this person because I don't like killing. And they have this conversation like 10 times. I think if it was Carl Gauss who couldn't do that, that would be more interesting.
That's a fucking terrible idea. And I have a very specific reason. For saying this.
Okay.
There are several moments, and we glossed over them because they do not fucking matter, where Alexis can understand creatures that nobody else can. Before she learns that she can do this, she just hears voices. I was very, very impressed that there was never a moment where it was like, oh, classic crazy hysterical woman having hallucinations again. There was never a point where like we literally were in a position where the narrative was throwing in our face the idea of Alexis being like medically insane. There was always an actual reason that she was hearing things that other people couldn't. And I think having a spectral imaginary friend imply that she has like subconscious desires to murder people may not be the mental health representation that we need at this time.
Maybe I misspoke. I don't think Carl Gauss should tell her to kill people. I just think that he should be there for her to bounce off of.
Okay.
I think it would be weird and bad if he did that. I think it would be funny if he was like very wholesome and maybe a little sassy like Nyx is.
Gotcha. Regardless, I do want to just reiterate that I appreciate how, I mean, again, she's definitely neurodivergent, but like, there's never a point where we're like, oh, Alexis is insane. Think like Gothicana and things like that, where like, I don't know, it seems like a thing in like dark academia where the female protagonist is always like implied to have some like, I don't know, like genuine schizophrenia. And I was so worried with stuff like Nyx. And then like she hears whispers and it turns out that it's Hell and Hound stalking her, the hellhounds that Charon.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up. That was, good reminder.
And when she first hears the whispers, I'm like, God damn it, she's crazy, and we're gonna have to have this whole crazy arc. And I'm like, I don't want to do it, but it does not happen. So unfortunately, I do not want more Carl Gauss than there already is.
I didn't think it was going to be her being crazy because I didn't think this book had the wherewithal to depict something that wasn't literally occurring. Like, I don't think it
oh, like it's literally the ghost of Carl Gauss.
That would be funny too. I would actually be extra on board with that.
Right?
Because ghosts are creatures, right? They're like
ghosts are creatures.
They're like a non-human, magical entity.
Yeah,
they're like not a barbaric species or whatever they said in the intro. Right. So ghosts are, I would think, by necessity creatures. So it would work still.
I guess I would have to agree by that taxonomy. Oh, here's a good thing. Jasmine, I'm very proud of you for putting more effort into defining what the fuck a creature is than Alex Astor ever did.
True.
I think we lost the plot eventually with this book, and you started using the term like monstrous creature, and like to distinguish it from like a creature as you define it. So, I don't think I would have used the term creature for like the non-human sentient people, but like it kind of fell apart by the end. I was like, okay, is this, when you say creature, do you mean like an animal or a centaur? You know?
Yeah, and like she also refers to Charon and Augustus as monsters constantly, and Titans are also monsters, but they're creatures too.
Right.
But Titans are supposed to be mindless and like flailing, so I don't know what that means.
I got no clue.
So maybe no idea either.
Maybe we'll walk back the compliment about creatures a little bit.
I have to say, Jasmine, I think that your enthusiasm as a young writer is something to be admired. Although I question the execution, I do like that we get a record of your thought process regarding the world building, like literally laid out for us. And again, this is probably one of those compliments that comes as a product of doing this show. And so like, I'm more used than most people are to reading books where the world building just is completely inconsistent and changes from book to book. And therefore, I like that in this one, we actually get like the entire world history laid out for us. We understand the ground rules.
Yeah.
They mostly don't change.
No.
So we understand like why the Chthonic and Olympian houses are fighting with each other. We understand what they stand to lose or gain based on Alexis being Hercules and based on like various initiates like surviving the protagonist trials. And like those fundamentals are in place, and we have a record of you working them out for us on paper. And I think that for a student in a creative writing class, that is great, because it's really obvious when students write their short stories, you know, like the night before they're due, and this definitely wasn't that. There's a little too much work put into it.
Right.
So I will give the backstory exposition dump right at the beginning that compliment.
Yeah. On a more ephemeral note on that line, like, Jasmine, if you didn't write one of the most uncomfortable sex scenes I've ever had the displeasure of witnessing in my life, I would be a lot more enthusiastic about this book as I am, because Jay laid it all out perfectly. Like, you have lived in this world, you understand for the most part its rules, you have some level of affection for Alexis as a character, and a couple other characters in the cast. The syntactical stuff is, I think falling short, but I think it's falling short as a sign of implementation, as a sign of experimentation, I should say. Like you're doing the inter thing, but I think it's more to establish voice than like Alex Astor is doing it. Alex Astor is doing it to do like a dun 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 sting, but you're trying to convey like the experience
like
of
the
someone
tone
talking.
of like a reading through a person's posts on Twitter,
right,
or Tumblr.
Right, exactly. And I could be a boomer about it, but like there's value in that sort of thing. Jay has all these video essays about microfiction and Twitter stories that betray a larger world. And I think you have this thing going on there. And it does, I wasn't being facetious, bring me back to that era when I was first learning what syntax was, and I was seeing like, oh, for this character I can use parentheses, and for this character I can keep sentences very, very short to imply taciturnity, and like things like that, where it's just like, right when you're at this cusp of like, your past interest, you are in the talent and skills development level, and that's intoxicating to see. And again, it all falls apart with the sex scene, but anyways,
you're like clearly trying to do something, and I honestly am annoyed with all of like the booktubers that I've seen who at the beginning of their video are like, oh, you wouldn't believe the annoying little parenthetical asides that this book is doing constantly, like that's not even what real literature looks like. And it's like, I understand that reaction because it does look unconventional, and like Andrea, like you've used the word experimental a couple of times because that one didn't occur to me, but it's absolutely correct. Like it is an experimental move to have this character be voicey in this particular way, and to use the like enter key, overuse the enter key maybe to do that as well. I think that it's something that with a little bit more thought could be worked out. I think that it could be tweaked to be less overbearing, but still recognizably unique.
That's key.
I think it's a question of like reduction of the instances of it.
Yes.
At least in part. But yeah, there's a there. Like it's okay for a book to make weird syntactical moves that a lot of fiction doesn't make. It's good even if a book is expanding our perception of what literature can acceptably look like on like a level of typography. Like I think that's a net good.
I think it's key to call out that it is the frequency or the overbearingness of them and not the presence of these techniques themselves. Like you could walk it back a little bit and still get the exact same.
It's kind of an issue of diminishing returns a little bit. Yeah. Because like we get up front that this is Alexis's like tone, and like we're intimately familiar with not just like what she thinks, but the way that her mind thinks, like the progression of the thoughts from one to the other. And that's in part through those parentheticals. But keep doing it so much, and that's when it starts to feel really annoying. And I think even the book itself like gets exhausted by doing this, because where the parentheticals start out as almost like strictly sarcastic, where Alexis will say like, I was tired, parentheses, on the verge of killing myself. By the end, the parentheses just start saying like completely contradictory things to what the text previously said. And I can't think of an example right now, but it's like not in a way that like subverts it. It's in a way where it's just like, wait, which one do you think? Like now I'm just confused. Another reason just to reduce the number of them, and I think that would solve it.
This goes back to why, even though he's terrible and I hate him and I hate everything he's produced, Rich Shapiro is such a good writer, because I'm not saying that like it's not didactic in the way that like Noah is, but the things that are symbols in his book are symbols for a reason, and they are employed for a reason. He does things with a specific intent to convey meaning. And I know that sounds so simple, but again, I've said it a million times on this stupid podcast, like that is not something we can take for granted with a lot of writers. And I think it's the exact same thing here. Jasmine is hitting enter for a reason. She is using parentheses and italics for a reason. She might be doing them too much and she might be annoying about it, but that doesn't change the fact that like there's an intentionality here that we have to call out as a positive. That's about all you can say though.
Compliment ? As is my way. When she teleports back home and she goes to Charlie, and Charlie's like, by the way, Fluffy died. Fluffy fucking died. I fed him all my beef jerky. I didn't eat for a month so that Fluffy could survive, but in the end, it wasn't enough. That did have me rolling. And the bad thing is, the reason I put a question mark on it is because that wasn't supposed to be funny. It was supposed to be sad. But it's just like, okay.
Despite the beef jerky, he perished from this earth.
Let's just say there's another little dog full of beef jerky in heaven tonight.
And it's okay because we have Fluffy Jr. She must have been prescient enough to realize that there would need to be two.
You know what I call this, Andrew, is an LDM, a lateral doggy move. Classic LDM.
I don't know. I think it's an upgrade because Fluffy Jr. is like magical or whatever.
Oh, true. Alexis, year 2090. Who are you? A female voice whispered in my ear. I sat up with a start and blinked groggily. My wrists throbbed with pain. They were scraped raw. Grasses and pink summer flowers rustled as a warm breeze blew through the emerald field I was napping in. Was she in a Sonic level? Rural Montana was a quiet, eerie place. Located 200 miles north of Helena's city lights, the power grid barely sustained our rundown trailer park. The Titans had arrived in the year 2050 and the world had crumbled. Kids at school called it apocalyptic core. I called it hell.
Titans remind me a lot of the storm creatures from Sky Shade.
That is so true.
I was reading ahead a little bit and it just said teeth, black veins, long claws, and super speed. So they're like, I don't know, like nebulous little flesh blobs with claws on them that fly around.
They could be perfectly spherical.
Yeah, I don't recall like a really in-depth description of a Titan. I could be incorrect, but I'm struggling.
No, I think it's always just like their claws did this or that, their teeth pierced whatever the fuck.
Yeah. All right. Well. So, in speaking of things that aren't good, Jay, I'm sure a lot of stuff has been bubbling up inside. We've kind of litigated them as they've come up, but there's probably a lot of sweeping negatives that we could give so that the SRO doesn't need to keep following her around so that she, I don't know, starts drawing weird shit on the bathrooms or jumping on people and growling like an animal.
I know, I feel like if we have to send her to the school counselor one more time, she might be expelled from the Spartan War Academy, parentheses SWA, and that would be really bad. So let's give her some critiques that she could work on in the upcoming drafts, which there doubtless will be.
There have to be.
I said I wasn't going to talk anymore about this, but I feel like it is worth emphasizing. The homophobia, needs to go, and not just because it's homophobia, but because it's the way it is weirdly incidental but also emphasized. It happens multiple times, but it's never the focus of the story, and the narrative itself never criticizes it, makes it seem like it's an expression of something that isn't fully realized, is maybe a little bit of true feelings coming out that should be explored, and it needs to go especially for that reason.
Right.
As I mentioned before, a lot of other booktubers have called out that this book is homophobic, and they've kind of pearl clutched about it in a way that I have found in its presentation somewhat conservative. They're like, this book is homophobic and that offends my values. And part of me is yes, it is, and in the sense that it is a very popular book that's representing queer people in a bad way. It is quote unquote doing harm, but this book is so poorly written. It is written by somebody who clearly does not have a lot of interest in craft and has not been in circles where craft has been taught and discussed and debated about. And I think that we can move on from the bigotry in this book in general, because there's way better things that we can learn from it if we stop focusing on the fact that it is quote unquote problematic. I feel like the word problematic is a left-wing clickbaity word increasingly. And it's yes, the book is problematic, and yes, the homophobia needs to go, but there's other books where this is way, way bigger of an issue, like Wild Animus again. because the abuse in that book is more subtle. It's very, very present, but like more subtle in such a way that like a inattentive reader could conceivably come away from that book on Ransom's side thinking that Lindy actually was an avatar of dark forces. Like that book is really, really harmful because it's well written. This book is not.
Or as a less esoteric pull, like I feel pretty similarly about Ready Player One. Like the haptic Uber Betty being presented completely uncritically is kind of on the same vein. If you're a 15-year-old kid, you don't know any better. You're reading like, and this is kind of like Ready Player One for girls is what we're reading here. Is like you're reading this guy, and if you don't think too hard about it and you just internalize it, you might be like, oh yeah, women are a prize to be won and their internal feelings do not matter as long as the ends justify the means, which it is very redolent of what's going on here, but with the shoes on the other gendered feet.
Obviously the homophobia can be critiqued, and I don't think that like that's where the conversation on this book should stop, but I also think that like people who are reading this book, and I mean, we're all booktubers who are doing this, so like there is a degree of performance to all of it, unavoidably, unfortunately. But the people who are like performing, like being offended, I don't know. I just kind of want to be like, really? Because like this book is it seems too juvenile to be offensive, at least on the homophobia front. Like I understand if like if someone read this and was like truly like offended by the like gender politics of it, especially the way women are treated. But I think that like the homophobia just, it feels like an incidental expression of like something that a somewhat unexamined person thinks but doesn't realize that they think, and like that sucks. But like, you know what I mean, right?
I do know what you mean. It's hard to ascribe a level of threat to something this impotent. So
exactly.
Sure, it's not good and you don't want it and this should be excised, but in terms of like, this is the most problematic, offensive book ever, not clickbait, like I don't think we're there.
Yeah, we're definitely not there. Something on a somewhat smaller scale, but it's like persistent, is the way that the snarky voice occasionally gets in the way of there being actual substance. Like I sort of like that Alexis like performs being a smart person by constantly internally making fun of things that other people are saying. And I think the book really does want us to believe that she's smarter than other people because she's like good at math. Like even though we don't ever really see her do math, we're always told that she's good at math.
Right.
I think that what we're getting is moments where the snarkiness gets in the way of her actually saying something smart. Like there are moments where instead of being sarcastic, she could make an actual like stinging observation about another person. And in that way we could have her actually enact the intelligence that she is like allegedly in possession of, instead of making her seem like a dumb person who really needs to think of themselves as smart for ego reasons, which is how she comes across to me currently.
There's a lot of telling and not showing with just Alexis's intelligence in general. Because I'm okay with her being a freak and a weirdo and off-putting and mean and snarky, but like, I don't know. I calculated the maximum angle for the javelin to be cast to hit the shaft of the shovel in the exact right location. Like, whatever. I don't know. There's not one instance of her like having any form of spatial reasoning or ability to calculate in her mind. I don't know. Like she literally just says, I put myself to sleep by doing equations in my head. Like, okay, sure.
I don't know, maybe Jasmine herself doesn't know much about math and so like wasn't able to like keep up this ruse of having a character who's good at math.
A ruse. I love that. Not a characterization, a ruse.
I mean, have you ever tried to write a character that, like, in fiction is, like, distinctly smarter than you are?
Sure, yeah. And it does
that
feel
not
like
feel
a
like
ruse.
pretending?
Yeah, it does feel like pretending. So I get what you're saying. It's just, it's funny to characterize writing as doing a ruse.
It is absolutely doing a ruse. You're trying to trick somebody into believing your perception of the world, if only for a moment.
If only for a moment. Speaking of perceptions of the world and small things, I despise mutts as a term. I know I'm probably supposed to because this is like this weird, gross, like pseudo-fascist society obsessed with blood, but I despise calling sentient creatures mutts. I think that is just, talk about problematic. I think that's just a stretch too far. And I'm like, all right, let's stop this now before we start comparing skull shapes. Like, I do not want to open this can of worms.
Like, we are moments away from talking about the genes that we would like to side.
Right.
Especially in this, like, fertility-focused narrative.
Right. And again, I realize there's a plot reason for me being so uncomfortable with this. So all I would ask, if you're married to the term mutt for a human or sentient person, maybe have Alexis express some discomfort about that, because she's like, oh, you know, Fluffy's a mutt when you think about it. Why are we comparing Fluffy to an entire class and race of people?
If you are force married to the term by some kind of trickery, and you absolutely couldn't get rid of it because you're magically bound to it by chains that encircle your heart, that would be a way of solving that, I think.
Yeah.
If that hypothetical situation were to come to pass.
Were it to. As sexy as that would be.
That's a way of getting around it.
Oh my god.
Maybe it's my turn to be neurotic.
Okay.
Because did you notice how much like Instagram Reels type of therapy mindfulness language Alexis dropped in this book?
No, I lost it through all the parentheses. What are you talking about?
Like, she would say things, or Nyx would also say things like, you're allowed to prioritize yourself.
Yes, Nyx, definitely. Nyx was constantly like, practice self-care and like shit like that. Yes, okay, I get what you're saying now.
Occasionally, Alexis herself would have those kinds of thoughts.
Sure.
And in my head, I was like, how does somebody who grew up in this total abject poverty like know these phrases that are basically exclusively associated with like contemporary therapists who practice cognitive behavioral therapy? Meanwhile, we're in this world where we're in this world where, like you said, World War II never happened. Do we even have CBT? Like, did that develop? Is mindfulness a thing?
And these are stupid questions. So, like, I wish there were just a way to get around it. I don't know. I don't care whether or not having World War II would lead to the erasure of CBT.
Well, I'll tell you what kind of CBT it didn't lead to the erasure.
Oh! Yeah, no, I just think we're probably like one or two light larks away from that happening there. Like, I feel like I just saw this Tumblr post where people were talking about like, we need to get therapy speak out of literature, and I'll have to like post this on Discord or something. It was like,
please do.
You should take care of yourself, said the Joker. Be sure to drink ice water and count 5 things that you can see, smell, and touch. And it's just like the said the Joker is like such a jarring thing. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that's what's happening here.
It feels so anachronistic.
Yeah.
Like, theoretically, it should all work because it's all made up. But there's something to me that like this type of therapy speak feels like way too bound to like I said, Instagram Reels.
Yeah.
And like products being sold to you by companies that want to make money off of the idea of wellness.
Right, for sure. Which is kind of like wanting to make money off of the idea of a book.
Yeah, literally. If you're like confused about the tone of this book still at this point in the episode, and I would not blame you for feeling that way. Imagine the therapy speak, and then imagine Alexis saying like holy crap right at the same time that somebody's like brain explodes because Augustus is like mind controlling them. Like all 3 of those completely contradictory vibes wrapped up into one is like the constant bombardment of feelings that you're feeling reading this book.
It is constant whiplash. Not in like a light lark way where like plot beats are coming out of nowhere. I mean, plot beats come out of nowhere here, but it's more like a Alexis doesn't know what's going on sort of way. But it's the track is laid out before her. What I mean is more like the emotional state of things is constantly at risk of falling apart in your hands. Oh yeah, see, this is talk about like uncomfortable stuff. I want to read this little bit from the end. A plan unfolded before me. a scheme. Alexis had been raised in the human world. She didn't know our customs. She wouldn't know that merely opening a betrothal box was an acceptance of a union. In contrast, everyone in Sparta knew the first step was to discover the sender. Her ignorance was perfect. We could exploit it, ruthlessly. Then, at her graduation ceremony, we'd reveal to all of Sparta that she'd accepted our gifts. She'd be ours, eternally. So, here's a small thing. Half of the characters yell constantly, and yeah. I think that is very annoying. I think it is deafening to the eyeballs that half of the dialogue you read is in all caps, or like every word is punctuated, and it gets like bigger and bigger caps, and I'm just like, is this appropriate? Do we have any other means of? Do we have any?
That's what you're worried about being appropriate. Of all the things.
I like my books a little bit quieter, I guess. I can't characterize this in a way that makes sense, but I hope someone has read this book as well and can confirm with me how many, like, I don't know, italics or all caps there are that just, it gets fatiguing after a while. Cleandro, he's a drill sergeant, so like, okay, fine. But like, especially the guys, and especially when like Alexis is involved in some way, it's awful.
Speaking of the anger, I actually wish a little bit more attention had been paid, like, explicitly to how angry all of these characters are. And because, like, all of the Spartans that are like that have been through the same trial, like, they all go through the Crucible, right?
Right.
Like, I want to see, like, how the trauma of that inevitably makes people into, like, this, like, insane person. Like, it breaks people, and, like, Cleandro, Charon, Augustus, Patroclus, and Achilles are all like living evidence of like what this does to people. Yeah. And yet the book like never makes that connection. It's never like, Alexis is never like, I'm with these boys right now and someday they will become exactly like this because of like the horrors they've endured. I feel like that's such a missed opportunity because like this society is so broken and so ready to be criticized, but the book just like doesn't. Alexis is just like, wow, these guys suck. Am I friggin' right? What the hey?
Right. She accepts it as like a fact of life, which I think is like weird for something trying to be this. Well, maybe it's not trying to be like revolutionary because it's not very interested in the feminism thing. Like Augustus thinking that this is a feminist statement, her doing the gauntlet or whatever, is wrong. He's incorrect about this. So
yeah, true.
Accepting the world as it is, maybe this is just like a fundamentally like conservative book and we haven't realized it because it's buried under neolib therapy speak and TikTok humor.
And grotesque sexual encounters.
Grotesque sexual encounters that I despise.
Yeah, I think it is a book that ultimately says like, yep, this is just how it is. You just gotta survive. There's nothing that can be done. It's hopeless a little bit in that way.
Yeah, which is another harrowing point. Yeah.
Truly. Okay, I think we've been burying the lead a little bit though, because there's two big problems with this book that are like fundamental to all books.
Okay.
This is not a story, and none of the characters develop at all. Both of these things are irrevocable truths about this book that completely make it a non-experience when you reach the end of it. Like during it, you feel like you're reading a book, but then you finish it and you're like, I did not read a book. I read like an extended exposition, arguably a bit of rising action as well.
Yeah.
This book, it doesn't have a story arc, and that's related to the fact that the characters don't have arcs either. So ostensibly, the inciting incident of this book is Alexis having to go do the trial of the YA novel. She's abducted against her will into like our equivalent of the Hunger Games, and she has to undergo, she undergoes the choosening so that she can then undergo like the trialing, and at the end she'll meet the cute boy and whatever. It's a YA fantasy dystopia. Sure. But then we are just in school for the entire book. And the stakes don't really change. The characters don't change. They just continue to be at school and suffer the same math tests and the same physical challenges and the same bullying over and over. And every once in a while, somebody gets killed, but it was somebody we didn't really know anyway.
Right.
And then by the end of the book, she gets forced married, has sex with these guys, and then she vows revenge on them. Like, that is, at most, like the Act 1 pinch. We have not reached the climax of this story. This book is not a story.
I'm inclined to agree that this book is not a story. However, I think what might be happening is less like the positioning of the plot points and more the connective tissue.
Okay.
I don't know. I know you'll get what I mean, but I don't know if we made it clear in the summary well enough. A good passing grade worth of this book, Alex is completely delirious. Like, she is sleep deprived, time is moving around her in weird ways, she's drugged, beaten, exhausted, can't use the bathroom, so she'll move from test or SAT to move to the murder trials, and then that's just a haze, and then she gets like injured, so she's out cold for a lot of that. She blinks in and out of consciousness as she meets Patroclus and Achilles. She spends half of the time at the Spartan War, the SWA. She spends half her time there, starving, malnourished, ran to the bone, and there is no time for her to do the things that a story needs to do to bring the character to these points. Yeah. Because she's just like drunkenly stumbling around in like the ether most of the time. You listed out these events, and I'm like, well, you're just kind of describing like a YA fantasy weird, just not fantasy, a YA dystopia weird sex fantasy thing. I think it's the fact that we're in a constant state of delirium that this doesn't work.
I think that definitely plays a big part of it. And it's because like the goal of this is not to write a story, but it is, like you said, to fulfill some kind of weird fantasy thing. And they've put it in the trappings of YA because the tropes are what is familiar and also incidentally what sells and what's popular.
Right.
So I think that the story is secondary, and Alexis having character development is also secondary to like the cool, quote unquote, morally gray boys that get mentioned in the foreword, that get mentioned in every interview with Jasmine. Like, they are the thing that she's really interested in. It's not Alexis, who, let me just be clear, does not have a character arc. I defy you to tell me one way that she has changed that is not like an incident of circumstance by the end of the book. Like, as a person, she's just as snarky, just as suicidal, just as allegedly good at math. She just has superpowers now. That's not character development.
Hey, Jay, you know who had an arc?
Who?
Noah.
I think it's a little bit sad, too, because I think that the trauma that Alexis endures is clearly an aspect of this story that's important to Jasmine, because she mentions it in a couple of interviews. Like, she conceives of this as in some ways a story about trauma, and it's not about trauma. It's a story that depicts instances of trauma, but it doesn't deal with that in any kind of way. It just shows it happening, and I guess expects us to be like, wow, that's very brave. And I think that because in another interview, she talks about having pulled like several consecutive all-nighters, finishing, I forget if it's this book or another one, but being in a delirium, I think that like that is also important to her because it is definitely drawn from her actual experiences. And so I think that like there's interests there that are being impeded by the desire for this to all coalesce into a sex fantasy, like a very weird one at that. And that's too bad. That's too bad. Because there is a story about trauma and delirium in here somewhere.
That's really interesting. I didn't know the thing about the multiple all-nighters thing, because I would say that the operative difference between Alexis doing this and Jasmine doing this is Jasmine is doing this because she as a person wants to write a book. that no one, as far as I know, maybe this is incorrect, no one kidnapped her and forced her to write a book. This is something she wants to do of her own volition. Alexis just doesn't want to get tortured, or she kind of does, because she's so nihilistic and suicidal at times that maybe she does want to get tortured. So the intentionality is not there.
It does make you wonder at times if some part of her does like the torture, because why else would she put up with it and continually threaten suicide, but only to herself? She doesn't tell other people that she's thinking this.
No.
Why is she doing that? It's like that sine wave thing I was talking about earlier. There's like moments reading this book where I'm like, she's definitely joking. And then there's other moments where I'm like, no, she is not joking. She must really want to die, but then she doesn't die. So why not?
Why don't you die?
What part of her likes the torture and why? That's interesting too, potentially.
I feel like I'm seeing her inner world, and these things aren't there that feel like they should be.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so uncanny. It's really just so uncanny to me.
It's super uncanny.
But you know, the thing is, like, having this context now about, like, what Jasmine alleges this book is about, I would read the sequel to this book. I would be very willing to read the sequel to this book, because God willing, this sentiment of, oh, I'm going to kill my abusive husbands, could turn into Alexis looking back at the events of Blood of Hercules and being like, okay, wait, these things that happened to me were very, very bad and have affected me. And maybe she can start using this therapy speak for a good cause and like start to overcome these things internally as she takes revenge on her captors or whatever. And then it's sexy with the shoe on the other foot.
I would like that. I mean, that would be great if the sequel like retroactively made the first one about something. Because like my biggest problem on the whole with Blood of Hercules is that it is not about anything. It contains a lot of ideas, but because like nothing in the characters actually changes, the book like has no ability to tell us like how it thinks the world should be. Which is, again, why I agree with this idea that in a way this book is fundamentally conservative. Like,
yeah.
This is the world. Like, what do you mean it should be a different way? Like, there's no reason to change, and that's like it's sort of a bummer. But maybe the sequel will provide some kind of way out for this. Maybe Alexis will develop, and in doing so, like tell us what the world could be like.
I mean, I feel like I'm falling for another Alex Astor, but I think you may be right. I think this could happen. Like, as far as I know, all Jasmine Mas has done other than this book are like shifter romances. Like,
yeah,
we think it's bad here. Like, I'm sure those shifter romances weren't good in terms of consent, syntax, formatting, things like that. So hopefully, God willing, inshallah, we get to a point where she takes stock of what happened in Blood of Hercules. She sees what worked and what didn't, and she chooses a path forward that creates a good story from the ashes. I think it could happen.
If she just does what she says she wants to do,
yeah,
she could achieve it.
If she just did the thing that she said would happen, yep. That'd be nice.
It's
too.
like, it's fairly easy to say this is a book about overcoming trauma through sexual liberation. Awesome. Now write that.
Right. Yeah. Write it where you're not being pinned down by your forced husbands if you want to talk about liberation.
My eyes shot open. I woke up with a broken gasp. Sleep paralysis locked my limbs and every cell in my body screamed of pain. I was still in my wedding toga, tucked beneath silk sheets. Deep male snores echoed around the cavernous room. Honk shoe, honk shoe. The three of us were lying in a decadent 4-poster bed. Memories of my husband's smug expression stabbed at me. Hellfire ignited in my chest, and it burned hot. Hatred filled me. They won't get away with this. They'll pay for tricking me. 2 new cords, chains, scorched my chest, singeing as they wrapped tighter around my heart like the marriage bond could feel my displeasure. Augustus and Charon moaned with pain in their sleep. There were consequences to marrying a monster. They'd begun. For them. All right, Andrew. We've talked about what's working. We've talked about what's less working. Let's see if we can offer some final thoughts on how we would fix this, given a second draft.
This is a section that I'm really struggling with because a lot of what I would suggest boils down to excising the things that we called out in our bad section. Pick anything, mutts, the yelling, the weird syntax, whatever. But I think in terms of right now, quickest thing you can do to make this book not fundamentally terrible is something that we've already said, and I'm going to try to like form this into one single proposal, is, and this is so bad, I'm turning this book into something I would still hate, but I think it would be less morally outrageous.
Okay.
As she goes to the Spartan school, and she's like, ooh, yeah, my teachers are kind of sexy, and this power dynamic is sexy. Which she doesn't do. Again, the switch is on and off. It's never in between. Like, she's like, it's weird, my teachers are staring at me, but like doesn't register it as physical attraction and certainly doesn't reciprocate the physical attraction. So keep the scenes the same, but be like, oh, Augustus was staring at me like a morsel he wanted to devour, and I wanted to feel his teeth upon me. I don't know. Like you can.
That was way too off the dome, Andrew. That made me uncomfortable. How easy that was for you.
Because I've been noodling on this. At some point, again, I have to let go of my pearls and accept that this is like a roller coaster, thrilling experience, not a real danger to real human people, and some people are into this stuff. I'm just saying, I didn't realize I was in for non-con when I read that disclaimer. So maybe change your disclaimer, like that could work too.
This is a super small stakes change compared to that. But I am completely baffled by the word Hercules in this title. In what way is Alexis Hercules? Like, I know that her real birth name is Hercules, and that like this is part of the draw of this, like in the marketing, is that this is a gender bent Hercules, but she's not stronger than the other characters, and she doesn't undergo labors that the gods task her with because they hate her for being born, like, and she doesn't like slay creatures, she doesn't have a club, like Hercules isn't known for blood powers, like maybe just don't make it called that. Don't call it that at all, because I'm pretty sure that Herakles is not the son of Persephone and Hades. Not a big mythology buff, notably not. So like that is really baffling, because I think it would be worth our time to like try to guess why she would even invoke Hercules at all. Is it SEO? Of all the mythological characters, Hercules is the most popular because of Disney? I think that actually does have something to do with it, because in all three of the interviews of hers that I read, 2 or 3, she mentions Disney's Hercules being an inspiration. So I think great. She just likes the idea of Hercules in the same way that I think she just likes the idea of a character who's good at math. Right. Or like she likes the idea of morally gray men. Like, none of these things are true in the story. She's not Hercules. She isn't ever doing math, and the men are not morally gray. No. But like, we keep getting told this, which indicates to me that Jasmine personally enjoys the aesthetic trappings of these things, whatever they are for her, but she doesn't actually know what she likes about them. Yeah. So, okay, wait, here's how I turn that into a more concrete suggestion. Journal about it. And that sounds like condescending and joking, but I do mean it. And you like mindfulness and therapy or whatever, so like get a journal for working this stuff out, because I promise it'll be rewarding, unironically. That's pretty good. It would be a completely different book, but I would be okay if Alexis, rather than being like a nerdy outcast, was like this, what's the right term for this? Big boned, like Brienne of Tarth, like
masculine woman type of character where her physical strength was more like integral to her character rather than just being something she has, like the normal amount for her level of magical blood, nothing particularly like that good. Or I don't know, even some labors, like could be mathematical labors. She could be like brains Hercules.
I had to solve 12 big math problems.
Sure. You know what? It would be more appropriate for her character than what we have, so
it would. And it would be kind of funny too, like actually a little bit silly, an unexpected twist on the legend. If we're going to spend so much time in these like angry men's heads, I almost wish that we would spend more time there because they feel so scary, I think in part because we get so little of them. Like they show up for 5 minutes to be like, I can't wait to trap her into a marriage for the rest of her life. How delicious that will be, as they're like curling their mustaches. I think if we spent like more time in their heads and like learned about how it came to be that like sexuality is so inextricable from anger and like domination for them, that we could then have a more interesting story about like trauma and like triumphal women or something like that. Because like that does seem like the book is like moving in that direction. And if like they are like that and we like come to better understand how like patriarchy is like rotting the souls of the men in Spartan society, and Alexis like has a very different attitude towards almost everything about life, having been raised in the human world, and like she shows them a different way. Like I'm not expecting her to be like literally like a feminist Jesus or something that like changes Spartan society by the end of the second book, but like just something. And like I feel like because all of the men whose minds we see into are like this, it must in some way be reflective of like something that Jasmine herself like perceives in men. And I want to know like what it is that she is seeing, because like that's like with Alex Astor and like the moment in I forget which Lightlark book it is. I think it's Nightbane, where like the water runs over her scalp, and I was like, that's a moment where I feel like I'm in touch with the actual author. When another scary man shows up, I feel like Jasmine herself is trying to tell me something about her perception of men, and I'm interested in that. Like I want to know more, because it feels not like a extended Wattpad rising action to a sex scene, but rather like a book that like a human person is trying to reach out and connect with me and like explain their worldview to me. And that's what I'm in literature for. A book that is
perhaps about men and experiences with men that lead to trauma and women overcoming said trauma. That could be fun.
It's that easy. Theoretically that easy.
I don't know. Do you have any like mythology themed suggestions? I feel like people are going to get on us for like not talking about the mythology or like the real life myth allusions being made here, other than that they're non-existent.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like that's another thing I saw booktubers like really raging about. And yeah, the mythology is like misused, but it's like also barely used. Like these are just names. Like it's basically just a hat for her to pull names out of, and then like we have some understanding of who these characters are. And it's untransformative. It doesn't really matter. None of the myths that these characters are associated with like feature in the story really. Like Titans are a completely different thing from what they are in mythology. So I don't know, like what is there even to say about it? It's just
No, I agree.
It's a wrapping paper.
I know of either of us, you would be more likely to have something to say about it, but I agree, it's stupid.
I think the only thing I have to say about it that might be interesting is that it is initially very confusing, the way that it is simultaneously like what we understand Greek myths to be, but like if they were real, but then also not. Like the Greek gods appear in ancient Greece one day. Okay, sure, whatever. But why are they called Spartans? Were there not already Spartans, like a human group of people? Because otherwise, it's exactly the same. Like, why change just that, but nothing else? It's very uncanny. And I think that, like we said about Nova's playlist, that kind of uncanniness wielded with intentionality has the potential to be really effective. But this book doesn't really do that.
No interest.
And it's also not uncanny enough once you get used to the gods being called Spartans to really be impactful anymore.
Yeah.
Like, all I can say is initially I was confused, and then I eventually got it, and then I moved on.
Yeah, that's about what happened to me. At a certain point, you see the word so much that I forgot that Sparta was a city-state and not a race of like sexy brooding boys. Please rework everything about the idyllic cottagecore homeless arc. I didn't feel like bringing this up because this is so CinemaSins, and I've already done my whole rant about why trailers are the worst. But also, once you're not in a trailer and you're living in a cardboard box, which apparently you can do and go to public school and have no
and have
legal
neighbors that you wave to as you walk to the bus
who know that you live in a cardboard box and like throw you meat and things. Knowing all of these things, and I know the answer is probably, oh, the Spartan blood, and maybe this was dealt with in a paragraph that I glossed over, but Charlie and Alexis should be dead from pneumonia 5 years before the events of this book. I refuse to believe that you can live in northern Montana in a cardboard box under a tarp with no insulation whatsoever and live for longer than one winter. I think that is the stupidest thing on the planet. I can't believe that like this is just a thing that they do. I can't believe they forced me to accept this as her background. It's dumb. And I know it's just their Spartan blood, but it just bothered me so much. And all the cottagecore little saccharine crap about them sitting around with the dog and the radio. I mean, it was terrible. It was just terrible. I'd rather it just be, oh, I grew up in an orphanage where everyone was so cruel to me, but at least it gave a legal precedent for me to go to public school and know how to use shampoo.
So glad I got those shampoo lessons in home ec.
Right.
What a lifesaver.
So, I mean, that's just a little thing, and it matters so incredibly little, but it's cartoonish the way that that's done, and I think that undermines your harrowing exploration of female trauma.
Speaking of harrowing explorations of female trauma, do you think that there's any percent chance that this book is just trollfic and it's all a joke? Because, like, the cardboard box, the colorful animals, the weird asides that almost seem like intentionally annoying in a way that could be perceived as bait. Like, do you think this is all just to get to people to react? Like, fundamentally?
Yeah, probably. That's kind of how I feel about everything. But okay, so let's work through this. So Jasmine Mas, especially, if you had asked me about like I don't know, Lauren Roberts, I don't think that's a troll fic. I think maybe she didn't work as hard as she could have on it, and people jumped on it because of the tropes. Same thing for Lightlark. Don't think that's a troll fic. Jasmine Mas is an interesting profile to me because, like we mentioned, she has a pretty big backlog of shifter romances. Now, I don't mean to disparage shifter romances, but I think classic literature that is not. So,
Indeed.
I could conceive of, okay, you are some sex pervert weirdo freak, and you make this insane book, and it just so happens to check the right boxes for instant stardom and booktok fame or whatever. And I've known stupid lawyers. I've known stupid people with JDs, but she also has her JT, which implies a level of cognitive function that I think would allow for her to be more intentional about this. I think she might have, if not done this all on purpose, then half-assed certain things, knowing that this was the most efficient path to the most attention possible.
Okay, so you do think that there is a degree of calculation to like the success of this book? Like,
I mean, I can only assume that there's a degree of calculation to any work of commercial fiction, right? That's the whole point of the commercial aspect.
Yeah. But you think that she's playing into that on purpose, at least in some capacity,
sure, yeah.
In order to, like, she's not an artist who's like unwilling to compromise her vision. Like,
no,
she's not she's not a sex pervert like who's so particular about their sex, their perverted sex, that she's like, no, my vision will not be compromised.
Right. No,
for the sake of the clicks. Like, you think she would bow to the clicks?
Right. Why do you not think so? You think this is not trollfic?
Oh no, I'm chewing on it. On it. So, full disclosure, I am rarely on actual book talk, right? Like, I don't really see firsthand very often like the TikToks of people who read these books. In part because the ones that I do see consistently feel like astroturfed ads. Like, there's no way of disproving the fact that somebody who's like, oh my God, I just read the craziest morally gray man romance book, and then they're flashing a picture of Sky Shade or something. Like, you can't prove that person isn't being paid to do that. It's basically impossible. And many of them feel fake to me, so I just assume that they are. So I don't find much value in watching them. So I rarely see that side of book talk. But what I do see is like left-leaning booktubers reacting to books like this, often in a way that is very incensed and, like I said earlier, verging on sort of pearl clutching.
Like we're doing now?
Like we're doing now. And I think that this book was really good at doing that. And like, Lightlark was one of the first ones to do that. And so I think a lot of people's reactions to it were genuine. But I think there's like an ecosystem starting to develop a little bit now. Like, now there's a proven model for like a book like this can come out and get popular on Book Talk, and then a bunch of people can like it. But then there's like a separate and related like symbiotic ecosystem of people who are like, oh, that's the worst book ever. I don't believe it.
Right.
And we're trying to like sort of spin that off into our own thing a little bit. But like,
we're still part of the problem.
This book is like enough cycles into that pattern that I think it is conceivable that somebody could have been watching from the outside, someone named Jasmine Mas perhaps, and like sort of figured out like what it takes to have a book that generates that kind of attention, both like the positive attention and the negative attention, because all of it drives attention. And that's a money baby. That's the business.
Right.
So I mean, I think it's quite possible.
One could argue that we're being paid for having ridiculous opinions and saying ridiculous shit online for attention. So, I mean, it's kind of, there's pots and there's kettles. Here's what I was thinking about the ecosystem thing is I was actually really mad. I vanity Google us pretty regularly, and there was someone saying it was a link to our Sky Shade episode, and it was like, I'm not going to watch this because I'm so tired of the Lightlark hype train. I feel like one person decided it was terrible, and then everyone jumped on it just to ride the coattails or whatever. I don't know exactly what was said, but Lightlark hype train. My hatred of these things is very, very organic and hard earned. So just like, we are part of this like ecosystem where it's feeding the next wave of controversial book talk dramas to unpack, and I mean, that's kind of fatiguing.
Our opinions are, I mean, I know our opinions to be genuine, but it's hard to know that anybody else's opinions are unless you watch a lot of their stuff and really get a sense of like who they are. And even then they could be tricking you.
Right. So it is kind of sad how this thing of ours has worked out to where I didn't like Lightlark organically. I have to say things like Sky Shade is the worst book I've ever read. Which, in that case, it was true, but I may not have made that the title of the video had that not been, like, a really searchable, really, like, far-reaching thing that you'd be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Let me click on this 4-hour video. So, like, I flatter myself to say that we're more genuine about it, but this is all about attention, and it's all calculated, so I don't know. Maybe next time we'll be reading some weird obscure books and not trying to touch the book talk stuff, because I kind of want to monitor the situation.
I think that's why it's critical that we continue to like mix up the books that we read and do weird stuff like Noah, because it ensures that we are not just like bottom feeders that are chasing whatever trend is popular and like becoming the thing we sought to destroy a little bit. But like, it's undeniable that like we have to do things like be strategic about our titles and our descriptions in our thumbnails in order to like exist in an ecosystem that prioritizes content and not thoughtful analysis.
Right. So yeah, we'll probably read something crazy next time. Order of the Orb Fox willing, we'll make it happen.
I'm going to stack the list with only things that I want to read.
Yeah. Stuff the ballot.
Warm spring rain poured down, but neither Charlie nor I minded. Anything was better than the freezing cold of winter. Charlie shuffled closer to me as we walked into the trailer park, shutting the barbed wire gate behind us with a click. I flung my arm across Charlie's broad shoulder. He was skinny but built wider and taller than I was, like if he got proper nutrition, he'd have impressive physique. I pulled him close, and he hunched low. Now his pale knuckles were coated in dried blood, yellow eyes sharp. Charlie's coloring was so different from my old golden skin and hair that people at school were surprised when they found out we were siblings. Behind carefully placed branches, we pulled back the tarp that protected our network of cardboard boxes from the elements. The floor was covered in old blankets and rugs we'd stolen from trailers right after people died in them, just before the Federation hauled them away. Fluffy, the 80-pound husky Charlie had named, stood up and flung herself at me like a battering ram as I fell to my knees. I kissed his muzzle and he shook his butt with excitement. Classical music played on our old beat-up solar-powered radio. It leaned against the right side of my head, and the vibrations tingled through me. Rain pattered soothingly against the tarp. Charlie signed math questions, and sequences of numbers floated around me as I thought about the Riemann hypothesis. Nix's scales were smooth against my face and Fluffy rubbed against my legs, getting hair everywhere. Gratitude flooded me. I was surrounded by my family and safe.
Well, Jay, I think that's all I have. I was really kind of expecting / hoping that this would be a much shorter episode, but I was really glad with what we were able to wring out of this awful, bloody, horrible, messy, terrible book that could have been perfectly fine were it not for a very, very ill-advised sex scene at the very end.
Yeah, this was so long, I feel like our listeners' ears are going to be bleeding, and maybe their eyes even too, and probably their noses by the time they get to the end of it. Yeah, with that, I think it's probably about time that we lay down a final verdict about whether or not Jasmine Mas is going to have to go to juvie.
Oh, I don't know if I'm ready to make that kind of call. I think...
Are we sending her to the brig?
No, she needs to talk to the school counselor, because I think there's some certain things about like what is and is not okay to have sex with that we need to iron out. We need to iron out before we get too far into this. But I'll be watching for the next exciting installment of whatever it's something weird like Blood of Villains of Lore.
Hercules next.
Villains of Lore, whatever the fuck that means. I think I would really want to see how this develops. I think there is capacity here to turn this into the narrative that this was promised to be. Again, this is not it, but maybe one day.
If the second book is the second half of this book, then I won't rightly be able to say that it did not fix that. I think I got the right number of negatives wrong in there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I got it. I think I got it. Well, Jasmine, welcome to the English Club. I'm so glad you're able to hang out with us today. Wanted to thank the Order of the Orb Fox again, as well as our channel members on YouTube. But I think we are about done with our meeting today. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you around campus.
We sure will. You won't be able to get rid of us. We need to get that one chapter from Heron's perspective where he's like, I wanted to protect her so bad it made my silk boxers tighten.
Yeah, that's all you, bud. That's
okay.
all you.
She just didn't make sense. From what I'd seen, Alexis blundered through life, naive and frustratingly innocent, with no thought for the consequences. Mix in her sanctimonious need to prove women should fight along Spartan men, and you had my worst nightmare come to life. But I was here. I was the consequences. I was going to keep her and all the women under my charge safe, whether she fucking wanted it or not. Alexis's delicate features blanched as she saw me coming. You better be afraid. Where'd my silken boxers? Hold on.
Where'd my silken boxers go? Andrew Podcast 2025.
Okay. As Alexis stared up at me, her long dark lashes fluttered. Up close, I could see the gold flecks in her midnight-colored eye. Her tongue flicked out, and she licked across her blood-covered lips. They were curved perfectly. My silk boxers grew tight, and I instantly loathed myself. Fuck! What am I doing? This was wrong on so many levels. Something about Alexis made me lose all control. She made me feral with rage.
Is there a way to say without being a prude that this book is just fucking foul?
I don't really have the right terms for it without sounding like a prude either, but there's a lot of stuff that kind of makes me nauseous vis-a-vis the men in this book and their actions.
It's just so... It's not that it's like quote unquote problematic that bothers me. It's just how shameless it is. And it's like weird, explicit moments paired with like the jokes. I don't get it. It's like, what is going on that allows it to flip back and forth between these emotional registers so suddenly? Like, it doesn't seem healthy.
No idea.